Jennifer Cave's family and friends are thrilled for her. She's just been hired on full-time as a secretary at an Austin law firm.
Her friend, excited by the news, said, hey, we should go out and celebrate.
But her friend is mixing vodka and Xanax and getting out of hand. Jennifer's first shift starts in a few hours.
They inform her Jennifer didn't come in, and they ask if she knows where she is.
But unfortunately, she never makes it.
The impact on the community and the UT community was significant.
It's a tragedy that University of Texas students will talk about for years to come. When Jennifer Cave fails to show up for her first day at a new job, her parents, Jim and Sharon, worry something has happened to her. They trace her steps back to the last place they believe she was, the Orange Tree condo belonging to a friend of Jennifer's. What they find there is a parent's worst nightmare.
Austin 911, do you need police, fire, or EMS?
Please hurry, please hurry.
Our address of the emergency?
It's an Orange Tree Apartment.
Sir, this is 911. We have a lot of help on the way. I just need to be able to confirm if she is conscious and breathing.
No, I think she's dead.
Okay, so she is past, you believe she's past doing CPR?
I do, and I also believe that we've got a crime scene here that I don't want to disturb.
My name is Tia Thomas. I'm an audio journalist in Austin, Texas. I published a podcast in 2019 called The Orange Tree, which covered the murder of Jennifer Cave and subsequent trials. West Campus is a series of neighborhoods that surround the University of Texas at Austin. I lived there for about 2 years, and during that time I heard a lot about the murder of Jennifer Cave.
August 16th, 2005, Jennifer Cave gets a call from the law firm where she interviewed.
She had just found out that day that she had gotten a job at a law office. In fact, she applied initially for a job at a law office that was a lower position than she ended up getting through the process of her interview because they liked her so much.
Jennifer calls friends and family to share the good news with them while she lays out an outfit for her first day at the new job. For Jennifer's mom and stepdad, this comes as a major relief. It sounds like a step in the right direction that Jennifer needs to get her life on track. Over the past few years, Jennifer's had trouble finding her footing. After high school, she does a semester at Texas State, then decides she wants a change, and ends up at Austin Community College. Jennifer grows up in the small town of Bishop, Texas, which has a population of roughly 3,000 people. Making the move to Austin, Texas feels like a long way from home. It's a big city with a thriving nightlife, overflowing with college kids looking to party. It's a shock for this small-town girl looking to find herself. Jim and Sharon see there's been a change in Jennifer. Sharon is especially concerned that Jennifer seems checked out from school. They fear that she's rudderless, not herself, and at risk of falling in with a bad crowd. Which is why Jim and Sharon are so relieved to hear Jennifer's great news about her new job.
And so that night, after calling all of her family and her friends to let them know the good news, her friend Colton Petoniak, excited by the news, said, hey, we should go out and celebrate. Colton Petoniak was a McCombs business student at UT Austin at the time. He was also like a small-town drug dealer. During his initial years of college, he started dealing drugs out of West Campus and partying a lot, as comes the territory of selling drugs.
A one-time top student at his all-boys Catholic school in Little Rock, Arkansas, Colton no longer seems to care about his academic future. He abuses drugs and alcohol and parties a lot. Lately, Jennifer has put some distance between herself and Colton in an effort to get her life on track. But on the evening of August 16, 2005, Jennifer decides to accept Colton's invitation, and the two go out to celebrate.
In Austin, especially for young people, when you go out to celebrate, you go to 6th Street. It's just a strip of bars, kind of like Bourbon Street in New Orleans. So that's where they decided to go that night. They went into Treasure Island and actually ran into a couple friends who were there for a birthday party. They remember seeing her with Colton, who was clearly very inebriated, where she was not.
It's getting late. Colton is intoxicated from a mix of vodka and Xanax. Jennifer will need to get home soon if she wants to be ready for her first day at her new job in the morning. The last time Colton and Jennifer are seen together by friends, Colton is upset because he can't find his phone, and Jennifer is trying to help him. The group of friends head to another bar and lose track of the pair at this point. The next morning, August 17th, 2005, Jennifer fails to show up for the first day at her new job.
Sharon gets a phone call from the law office where Jennifer is supposed to start. They inform her Jennifer didn't come in, and they ask if she knows where she is. Sharon is distraught and calls her daughter.
She wasn't picking up her phone, and she never really did that, especially like at this point in her life. She was being really responsible and getting back to people, so that seemed like odd behavior for her mother and her family. So at the point that Sharon Cave realized that something was going on when her daughter wasn't picking up her phone.
The whole situation immediately sets off alarm bells for Sharon. She's worried something has happened to Jennifer. And since her daughter is on her phone plan, Sharon quickly gets a log of all the numbers Jennifer has recently called. Sharon speaks to a friend of Jennifer's named Michael, who claims he spoke to Jennifer the previous night. Jennifer tells him she has a friend who's having issues and agrees to hang out with him. Michael tells Sharon the friend's name is Colton. Sharon finds Colton's number in Jennifer's call log. She calls him, but he denies having seen her the previous night. Something doesn't add up.
Colton's been getting calls all afternoon from family and friends who know that he was with Jennifer the night before, and that's the last person that anyone saw Jennifer with, up until she didn't show up to her first day of her new job.
Sharon gets back in touch with Michael, who insists that Colton and Jennifer were together the previous night.
She keeps Michael on the phone while she tries Colton again on another phone.
Colton is irritated and tells Sharon he hasn't seen Jennifer and he doesn't know where she is.
Michael knows that Colton is lying, but why? What is he hiding?
Jennifer Cave grows up in the small Texas town of Bishop and eventually moves to the big city of Austin, where she struggles with school and friends. Jennifer has problems finding her footing. Her parents are worried that she doesn't care about college and doesn't know what she wants in life. She's involved with some bad influences, like her friend Colton. Jennifer's parents see her turning her life around when she lands a job as a law secretary. But the night before her first shift, she agrees to go out with friend Colton. She never shows up for work the next day. Sharon has been calling around, trying to get hold of Jennifer without luck. According to her friends, she was last seen with Colton, but when Sharon calls Colton, he denies having seen her. Sharon and Jim decide to call 911 to report Jennifer missing.
Since Jennifer was technically an adult, there was no way for them to file a missing persons report yet. They have to wait the certain amount of time before they could do that, and an official missing persons report can be filed.
The next day, August 18th, Sharon and Jim still hadn't heard from Jennifer. They could wait no longer.
No one was really giving her any answers, especially not the person Jennifer was last seen with, Colton Pitonyak. She got really worried. Jim and Sharon decided to drive up to Austin and check in on her.
As Jim and Sharon make the 3-hour drive from Corpus Christi to Austin, they call 911 again.
Sharon speaks to the Austin Police Department and explains the situation.
While it's still too early to file a missing persons report, Sharon describes Jennifer's behavior as out of the ordinary, and the detective deems it worth following up on.
An officer is sent to check out Colton's place. His car is parked in its space, but there's no response at his suite. For now, there isn't much she can do. Later that day, Jim and Sharon arrive in Austin.
After not finding Jennifer or any trace of her where she would normally be, her apartment or elsewhere, they end up going to Colton's apartment. It's the first stop they make, actually, because Jennifer's roommate, Denise Winterbottom, said that she wasn't there at their apartment. So they head to the source of where they last know Jennifer to have been, with Colton.
They knock at Colton's condo. There's no answer. They try the police again and explain that Jennifer's car is here, but they still haven't been able to get in touch with her. They are told that there is no probable cause at this point to enter Colton's apartment, and for now, there's nothing more to do than wait.
They end up knocking on the door for several hours, looking for a sign of any movement inside, just anyone around, in and around, that knows where Jennifer is, but they can't get any information still, and the door is locked. It seems to be deadbolted, and they know that because they call someone to try to come unlock it for them. They call a locksmith, and they can't get in because it's deadbolted from the inside. So their next step is to just look for any way to try to get in there. They see a little crack in the outside window. And Jim and Sharon have the idea of maybe opening the window through that crack.
Jim goes and gets a piece of a pair of sunglasses from the car.
And he uses that to basically crack open the window and unlock it from the inside.
He instructs Sharon to wait outside. He knows he may be in danger.
He climbs inside, and once he's there, he's just trying to get through the darkness and the clutter. He describes walking through the small condominium, yelling out loud, trying to make his presence known. If there's anyone in there, to let them know that he is coming in, that he's Jennifer's stepfather, and that he's not trying to harm anyone. He's just trying to look for Jennifer. But no one's answering. It's dark and there's no sign of movement. And that's when he starts to smell something coming from the bathroom, which he doesn't really know his way around this condominium, but he's drawn to the bathroom because of the smell.
What Jim discovers inside Colton's apartment shakes him to his core. He's barely able to convey to Sharon that there is a dead body inside, and he thinks it may be Jennifer.
Austin 911, Denise Police, Fire or EMS.
Please hurry, please hurry.
Our address of the emergency.
It's at Orange Tree Apartments.
Yes, sir, this is 911. We have a lot of help on the way. I just need to be able to confirm if she is conscious and breathing.
No, I think she's dead.
Okay, so she is past, you believe she's past doing CPR?
I do, and I also believe that we've got a crime scene here that I don't want to disturb.
With police on the way, Sharon and Jim may finally be able to answer the question of what happened to Jennifer. But new questions begin to form. What happened to Colton, and where is he? An officer arrives at the condo to discover a grisly crime scene. He finds the body of a young woman in the bathtub. It is partially dismembered, missing both the head and the hands. Officer Barberia notices a bloody hacksaw. He sees a plastic garbage bag near the tub, and given the shape of it, he knows what's inside. Who is capable of doing something like this? And why?
While the primary crime scene is located in the bathroom, investigators discover what are likely bloodstains in several other areas of the condo. They also discover the likely murder weapon, a 9mm handgun, as well as 2 shell casings. Whoever did this didn't make much of an attempt to clean up afterwards. Nevertheless, at this point in the investigation, there's many more questions and answers, so they must be thorough in cataloging the evidence.
Given that Colton's condo is so close to campus, students are rattled by the fact that a murder has occurred so close to home. But for now, details of the grisly crime are withheld. The body is identified as Jennifer Cave. The cause of death is from a 9mm bullet that passes through Jennifer's arm and lodges in her aorta, stopping her heart and causing near-instant death. But a second bullet is fired.
It's difficult to describe and impossible to comprehend, but a second bullet from the same gun was discovered in the severed head of Jennifer Cave. The bullet entered the area of the stem of her neck and lodged in her skull, indicating that it was fired after she was already dead. Whatever the reason for doing this, it may present investigators with a glimpse into the psyche of her killer. Detectives are intentionally withholding the details of the crime from the press. They fear that if the public knew, imposters would come forward and claim responsibility. Anytime you have a murder like this, it tends to draw out some very depraved individuals, attention seekers, all who want to take credit for it.
Detective David Fugit is assigned to the case. His main priority right now is tracking down Colton for questioning.
One of the detectives who was really following this, who was in charge of tracking down Colton, actually had kind of an easy time pinpointing him at the time because Colton never turned his cell phone off.
The cell phone trace shows that Colton is in Piedras Negras, Mexico, but pings from cell phone towers aren't useful in pinpointing someone's exact location. If he has any hope of extraditing Colton and getting to the bottom of what happened to Jennifer Cave, he'll need to coordinate with local authorities.
Jennifer Cave is drawn to the troubled, self-destructive persona of her friend Colton. Jennifer's stepfather, Jim, describes this as the, quote, stray dog theory, a pull to help the wayward, the down and out. But since high school, Jennifer herself has been without much in the way of purpose or direction. But Jennifer seems about to turn her life around, with a full-time job at a law office where she's excited to start work. Only Jennifer never shows up to work. And in their search to find their daughter, Jim and Sharon are led back to Colton's Orange Tree condo, where they find Jennifer's body in the bathtub. Now detectives are desperate to speak to Colton and get to the bottom of what happened. But they'll need to find him first.
While detectives are busy trying to track down Colton, they get a call from the parents of Laura Hall. Laura's parents have received some cryptic emails from their daughter saying that she's gone to Mexico and she doesn't plan on coming back. Investigators' lone fugitive theory is about to go out the window. Colton Pitonyak is in Mexico, and he's not alone.
Laura Hall was a student at UT as well. By all accounts, including her own, she had a huge crush on Colton. She liked him a lot, and she was hoping to pursue a romantic relationship, something more serious than he had in mind at the time.
While he's not yet sure how she's involved, Fugit is now looking for Laura Hall and her green Cadillac.
footage is captured of Laura and Colton crossing the border. At the checkpoint where they cross into Mexico, you see footage of Laura and Colton handing over their IDs to officials. The drive is pretty long, but Laura seems to have driven the whole way, and Colton in the passenger seat was still trying to stay as drunk as possible and still taking a lot of Xanax.
Detective Fugit now has concrete proof that Laura Hall is involved and that she and Colton have fled to Mexico.
Detectives already have a mountain of questions for Colton, but more questions are raised as to how and why Laura Hall is involved and what role, if any, did she play in Jennifer Cave's murder.
Meanwhile, nearly 4 hours away, Colton and Laura Hall are holed up at a hotel in the Mexican city of Piedras Negras.
So after making their way into Mexico, Colton and Laura are hiding out at a hotel, and it's at that time they're really paranoid. Colton is still drinking and doing a lot of drugs. They end up befriending the hotel manager, Pedro Fernandez. He invited Colton over actually to watch mixed martial arts on his television.
Colton and Laura accept Pedro's invitation to watch a fight at his place. Colton is very inebriated, but still paranoid.
When this happens is kind of when things begin to unravel. When he notices that Laura and Colton are displaying kind of odd behavior, he gets a little suspicious.
Colton and Laura openly ask the hotel manager about extradition laws, about selling Laura's car, and suggest they can't go back to the U.S. Well, naturally, that sets off a lot of red flags.
And during this time, when Laura and Colton are over at his place, kind of partying, watching mixed martial arts with Pedro, is when that infamous photo is taken of Laura and Colton by Pedro's child's playpen, smiling ear to ear, holding a stuffed animal. It's described that, Colton is really paranoid, very somber, and stressed out, but this photo tells a completely different story of how they were feeling at the time.
Detective Fugit has yet to learn Laura's motive for aiding Colton, but given the high media profile of this case, he is eager to get the two in custody.
Yes, the media was really all over this case, and particularly the story about Colton and Laura going to Mexico and being in hiding for a few days. That's when the media scrutiny was very high.
The hotel manager continues to be suspicious of the odd American couple he's just had over to watch the fight. So he speaks to a friend in the Border Patrol and learns of a murder that recently happened in Austin.
He reaches out to Detective Fugit and sends him the photo of Colton and Laura, as well as the location of the hotel they are staying at.
Thanks to the hotel manager, detectives are able to narrow their search and locate Laura and Colton. They get in touch with Mexican law enforcement, who are eager to cooperate with U.S. authorities.
On August 23, 2005, 5 days after the murder of Jennifer Cave, the pair of fugitives are arrested in their hotel room by Mexican authorities.
Laura and Colton are separated and interrogated, but because they only have an arrest warrant for Colton, they let Laura go. Investigators present Colton with what they know about the case. There's a mountain of evidence against Colton, so they're hopeful that he'll cooperate. But Colton is afraid to talk without his lawyer.
Are you telling me that you don't want to talk to me and you want an attorney? Either you want to talk to us today, and obviously there's no attorney present. Okay. All right, then we can't talk to you, and we'll just go with the information that we have.
Fugit must terminate the interview. He'll have to wait a little longer to find out what happened to Jennifer that fateful night. Detective Fugit learns his prime suspect in Jennifer Cave's murder, Colton Petoniak, has fled to Mexico with friend Laura Hall. Colton and Laura are arrested in their hotel room in Mexico 5 days after Jennifer Cave's murder. Laura is released and Colton is held. He refuses to speak to police without his attorney. Assistant District Attorneys Bill Bishop and Stephanie McFarland are assigned to Jennifer's case. The main facts of their case are simple. Jennifer was found in Colton's apartment.
The gun that killed her belonged to Colton. His fingerprints are all over the weapon. Add this to the fact that he fled to Mexico, and the case seems pretty cut and dried. But the DA has learned that Colton's parents have hired legendary defense attorney Roy Minton, and they wonder what sort of defense he could possibly be mounting. But they're ready for a fight.
Roy Minton is known for taking on hard cases, but he's also a pragmatist. He and his partner, Sam Bassett, must carefully comb the details of the case, making educated guesses at how the state will come after their client, and ultimately form a defense that might reasonably stand up in court.
My name's Sam Bassett. I've been practicing law in Austin, Texas for 32 years. I specialize in criminal defense, and I represented Colton Petoniak at the time of his trial. This case was certainly the most high-profile case I had been involved in. There was quite a bit of publicity in Austin, in the Austin area, and throughout the state, and perhaps nation.
One of their big hurdles is that Colton's substance abuse has created massive gaps in his memory. And without witnesses, the case will eventually come down to the physical evidence, mainly the handgun that is fired, causing Jennifer's death.
I think the impact on the community and the UT community was significant. Colton was not the type of person that would usually be accused of committing some sort of crime like this. He was a good student who had been in a fraternity, and a lot of people were scratching their heads in the UT community about what had happened, why it had happened.
With questions still lingering on all sides of this case, the day of Colton's trial arrives. Jennifer's family and the community at large are hopeful that this trial will finally provide answers for what happened to Jennifer Cave and why.
The judge makes the surprising decision to allow Court TV Network to televise the proceedings. This very public case will now be available in real time to a shocked and curious public audience.
In this case, the Court TV camera was set up literally in the middle of the gallery, and it was a very large camera. Under the rules, the jurors couldn't be photographed, and witnesses who did not want to be photographed were excluded. But it was a very dominating influence in the courtroom, so it was a very significant part of what was going on inside the courtroom.
In the public eye, Colton is already guilty, but the question that people want answered is why he did it, and why he dismembered Jennifer's body the way he did. For the state, however, the burden of proof lies only in demonstrating that Colton did in fact murder Jennifer. The question of why he did it is not necessary to answer.
Colton's lawyers offer a rather surprising plea. They are not going to contest that Colton killed Jennifer, but they are asking that the charge of involuntary manslaughter be considered in this case.
In the opening statement, we addressed our theory of the case at that time. And the theory was that because of the manner in which Jennifer was shot, under the arm on the side, and the kind of random nature of the bullet going across her body and actually piercing her aorta, which was a very long shot type of situation, combined with everything we had learned from witnesses, all that information we compiled and had to come up with a strategy to defend him against the charge of murder.
In Colton's trial, he came out initially and due to the advice of his lawyers, said, I did this, I did kill Jennifer, but it was unintentional.
Based on the information we had, we concluded that the theory of the accident fueled by intoxication was the most credible theory that we could go on in defending Colton.
The state also brings up that this wasn't the first time a gun went off in Colton's apartment. He was known for playing around with guns a lot because he was selling drugs and he wanted to have this like hardcore image of him as a gangster. So they bring up a specific instance of him playing with a gun and it accidentally firing and shooting his dishwasher.
But ultimately, the judge decides against allowing the jury the charge of a lesser offense.
He denied our request, and I think this jury would have struggled if they had the option of manslaughter versus murder.
The trial doesn't last long. Colton's defense is limited in its options, as Colton has admitted to killing Jennifer. Their only hope is to paint a picture of a man who was not aware of what he was doing and hope for leniency in the sentencing.
Essentially, Colton's lawyers were just trying to get him a lighter sentence. They were trying to get him some sympathy from the jury by showcasing that he didn't remember any of that night, that he was so barred out on Xanax, had taken so many pills and drank so much that whole day that there's no possible way he could have intentionally killed this friend that he initially set out to celebrate her success with.
Minton allows Colton to testify in his own trial, a rarity for someone accused of murder. Minton doesn't go easy on his client. His tactic is to show that there are serious gaps in Colton's memory, and that Colton likely misfired the gun that killed Jennifer by accident.
I think the most compelling witness was Colton Petoniak, and I think he was being truthful. I don't think he remembered what happened. And I know that that's, a lot of people have criticized him and us for testifying to that, but I think he was telling the truth. They also tried to show that the gun didn't have an unusually hair trigger type of pressure point. It is something that we had our own ballistics expert look at to see what the pull ratio was on the gun to determine if, for instance, if that would have been consistent with our theory of an accident. It wasn't ruled out by ballistics that it could have been an accident, but it was also pretty solid evidence that the gun didn't have an unusually light pressure trigger.
For Colton's attorneys, their only real hope is to try to convince jurors that Colton shot Jennifer by accident, and that the ensuing dismemberment was the suggestion of Laura Hall.
Colton is seen at a hardware store on August 17, 2005 at approximately 2:34 p.m. He has with him a shopping list. He purchases a hacksaw and some cleaning supplies. His defense alleges that he was still intoxicated at the time and that Laura Hall came up with the shopping list and the plan to cut up Jennifer's body.
Minton suggests that Colton is so messed up on prescription drugs and alcohol that he can't think for himself, and that Laura, a young woman completely in love and obsessed with him, did all the decision-making, including the decision to flee to Mexico. But for those hoping to hear Laura's side of the story, they are left in the dark.
Laura Hall showed up because we subpoenaed her to the courtroom. And after that, she asserted her Fifth Amendment privilege and did not testify.
The jury reviews the facts of the case and comes to a unanimous decision.
Colton ends up being charged with murder, which is a 55-year sentence in his case.
At the back of the courtroom sits Colton's accomplice, Laura Hall, whose own road to justice is about to be paved. On August 17, 2005, Jennifer Cave is brutally murdered at the Orange Tree Condos in Austin, Texas. And the primary suspect, Colton Petoniak, flees to Mexico with friend Laura Hall. Colton is tried for Jennifer's murder and found guilty. He is sentenced to 55 years in prison. But Laura Hall's ordeal is just beginning. Laura Hall is brought in on charges of harboring a fugitive and tampering with evidence.
What was most disturbing was there was medical examiner evidence that after the head had been decapitated from the body, that a bullet had been shot up through the neck, and the bullet was lodged in the top of the skull. So there was a post-mortem shooting of the head of Jennifer Cave's body. That was shocking to the medical examiner, and I think it was shocking to everybody involved in the case. How could somebody do something like that? It was certainly our theory that that was done by Laura.
Officer Mark Gilchrist wants to give Laura the opportunity to explain herself. But when it appears she may not be willing to cooperate, he informs her that she's under arrest.
You don't want to talk to me without your attorney, that's what you're telling me? Okay.
I mean, unless, I don't know. If you're saying I might be in some kind of trouble.
Read that.
Oh my God.
Laura Ashley Holmes, you are under arrest for hindering apprehension.
Hindering apprehension?
Yes, ma'am. Now, you understand how
Okay.
serious this is?
Oh my God.
Okay.
What's gonna happen?
You're going to go to jail.
What did I...
You got to tell the truth.
Laura decides to waive her right to an attorney and cooperate with detectives. But her story of what happens and her involvement in it changes wildly. At one point, she claims Colton tells her he is attacked.
He said that 3 people came into his apartment. One of them was Jen. They had guns. He said that, well, he didn't say one of them was Jen, but he said, one of them was, one of them was her, right? He said he left the door unlocked and they came in shooting at him.
But there's no evidence to back this claim, and Laura admits this was unlikely. Laura changes her testimony from she felt scared and threatened by Colton to she was in love with him and didn't believe he committed the crime.
I just couldn't fathom his guilt. And I wanted to be able to help him in any way I could.
Detectives are left without a clear picture of Laura's involvement. One thing, however, is clear. Laura's DNA is found throughout the condo, including on the murder weapon, the 9mm handgun that killed Jennifer Cave. The question that most people hope will be answered through Laura's trial was who mutilated the body and why. But this question is never answered. During Colton's trial, he claims he doesn't remember what happened, and Laura claims she had nothing to do with it, even though her DNA can be found on several pieces of evidence.
Laura ends up being charged and sentenced 5 years for hindering apprehension and tampering with evidence. That's simply because it was the maximum that she could really get for those 2 things that really were the only things that they could use to charge her with.
While in prison, Laura appeals her case.
While Laura was in prison serving the first part of her initial sentence, she actually spent a lot of that time talking to her friends and family from jail phones. And all those phone calls get recorded. And so, lawyers will tell you, hey, if they're still going to take something to trial, don't say anything that maybe will be inflammatory or can be used against you.
That girl's mom sounded like a real moron.
She's mad because I have a daughter and you're not dead, and she doesn't have a daughter. And
Yeah, so she's jealous. Maybe she's going to stab him to death. Everybody knows, I'm going to be okay because I'm going home in mid-March, it's official.
Well,
Tell me you're not going to piss on my good fortune.
Well, it's probably going to happen that way, Laura.
I'll kill you.
Well, I hope you don't.
Laura said a lot of things that were pretty damning to her friends and family, and a lot of that was used in her second trial.
They've had an interview with that girl's mother again.
She's going down. She's going down, one way or another. She's going to pay. She's going down.
It was something that kind of shocked the whole courtroom, was hearing Laura's jail phone calls. It was definitely something that added to the picture that the state was trying to paint of Laura being someone that would be able to do something that was this heinous. As a result, Laura's sentence was doubled from 5 to 10 years.
What right do they have to make these decisions? They're ruining my life. What right do they have to do this? Our Constitution gives them that right? No, I can't believe that. This is not my America.
Over the years, several individuals come forward and sign affidavits stating Laura claims that she killed Jennifer. One of them is Laura's cellmate.
It's been shown in all of the actual innocence cases we've seen in the last 10 or 20 years that jailhouse informants are some of the most unreliable witnesses, both for the prosecution and for the defense. So if you're basing your defense solely on jailhouse informants, you're kind of grasping. And that was one of our concerns about using the single person from the jail that we had interviewed as a defense to Colton by pointing the finger at Laura.
Colton's appeals never amount to anything, and Colton is still serving his 55-year sentence. They do, however, continue to cast a shadow over Laura's life. Laura was released on March 15, 2018, after having served her sentence. The one good thing to come from the case is Sharon's work in getting the Jennifer Cave Act passed in 2007 by Governor Rick Perry.
Specifically because of Laura's trials, the creation of the Jennifer Cave Act came about. It was something that was pushed by Sharon Cave and the Cave family as a whole. It has two parts to it. The first part being specifically about the sentencing that Laura had, and it changed it so that no longer, if there's a case like this that happened again, we wouldn't have to use those grave digger laws to sentence someone for something like this again. And the second part was actually pertaining to the jury. Sharon Cave was really affected by a lot of the jury members' reactions to the exhibits that were shown at trial and the details that they were forced to hear. And so what it did was it offered counseling for jury members that take part in Texas trials, which is a huge deal because prior to this case, that was not something that was mandatory for Texas to offer jury members. And overall, I think that it just really showcases that family's resilience and their ability to take this situation and actually give back to their community. Even in like a moment that is really heartbreaking and distressing to them, they found a way to make a difference.
Even the quietest towns have their secrets to hide. A neighborhood full of family doesn't mean it's always safe.
There's blood on the bed. He's struggling all the stuff out of his mouth.
Well, the first thing I think they noticed when they were walking up where the guns lined up along the sidewalk.
Robinson Police.
The police found when they arrived what looked like a burglary situation.
No lie stays hidden forever, and the evidence always finds the truth. Just south of Waco, Texas, is the small suburban area of Robinson.
Robinson is a suburb of Waco, and just your quintessential bedroom community, as the people call them. Very close-knit.
The two cities are right together. It's basically a residential area with some shops and a little bit of business.
You have the small town feel, but close enough to a bigger town with bigger amenities in it.
A lot of good folks live there, small school, very tight-knit community.
But even the smallest towns can have their dark side.
Robinson 911, what's your emergency? Hello? Okay, what's the problem? I got up this morning, I was in my son's room because I didn't sleep. My back door was open, my husband's guns are all gone, and there's blood on the bed, and she is struggling all the stuff out of his mouth. Okay, so he is there? He's here, but I have to stay on with me. Hang on one thing, I'm going to dispatch officer, stay on. I do have officers in around. You don't see anybody, I mean, like there's nobody around or anything, do you? I don't see anything, just the back door was wide open. I went back there, turned on the lamp, and I shut the door, and then I heard my husband put my hair off. I can't get him to respond to me. But he is breathing. I can see his face moving up and down.
In the morning hours of around 6 o'clock, a woman named Gentry called in to 911 and said that her husband had a gunshot wound in the head and blood all over.
The police are quick to arrive on the scene, showing up even before Darlene gets off the phone with the 911 operator.
Robinson Police.
I'm sorry, what?
The police found when they arrived what looked like a burglary situation. Mr. Gentry was in bed, and he had received a gunshot wound to the head.
With nothing else left to do, Darlene Gentry is left to wait and hope that her husband Keith will survive.
Darlene and Keith Gentry were a young married couple with children living in the city limits of Robinson, Texas.
She was a homecoming queen at Cameron, a city near Waco. Keith and she met at Texas State Technical Institute, a school, and they dated off and on while they were in school, and then both of them got out and left. She went up to Dallas, but then moved back, and they continued dating and finally got married. They, in pretty short order, had 3 children.
Keith was a hard-working guy, worked for a drafting company. He lived near his folks, a very close-knit family.
Keith's father, Wayman, said that Keith didn't appear to be very happy, and that he was going to stick it out with her, but it seemed like that they were having difficulties.
Darlene originally studies to be a dental assistant and moves to Dallas to work for a dentist. But after an incident where her car is stolen, she decides to move back home and goes back to school to get a nursing degree.
You know, the fact that she was a homecoming queen, she was an exceptionally attractive young woman.
Keith proposes to Darlene in 1999, and their wedding is soon after. As their lives together in marriage truly begin, they move into a house next door to Keith's parents. In the early morning of November 9th, 2005, Darlene is the first in her house to stir. She wakes up in one of her children's rooms after spending the night trying to help them sleep by watching movies together.
The children were sick, that she had been staying with them during the night, and that she got up early in the morning and started going around the house, and the back door was open, and that Keith's guns were missing.
Darlene races from the open gun cabinet to find Keith, all the while calling out his name.
And so then she went into the bedroom and found her husband, Keith, lying there with blood and a bullet wound in his head.
When Darlene finds her husband mortally wounded in their bed, she calls 911 for help.
911, what's your emergency? There's blood on the bed, and she is struggling.
Police arrive at the scene within minutes. Immediately upon reaching the house, things start to look off.
Go check the inside. Go check the guy. Watch yourself going in. I got a lot of guns here in the front yard. Robinson Police.
I'm sorry, what?
Stand right here and just keep scanning. Don't let anybody near them guns.
Well, the first thing I think they noticed when they were walking up were the guns lined up along the sidewalk.
Keith Gentry had several hunting-type weapons, long guns, shotguns, rifles, and they were kind of out in the grass in the front yard, and they were kind of lined up in rows. And there wasn't but about maybe 5 or 6 of these.
Keith is in critical condition and is treated as the first priority before any investigation into the scene can begin.
This is not a high-crime area by any stretch of the imagination. And to make that point even more profound is that where they lived in particular is surrounded by family, almost like a family compound. And none of what we were being told about the crime scene made sense.
Keith is taken to the hospital. Every second could mean the difference between life and death.
The gun case was open, but it was unlocked with a key.
When doing an inventory of the guns, found out that one was in fact missing. That didn't match anything that they had ever seen about a robbery.
It just did not sound to the Robinson Police Department like she was as concerned.
They called and said that Keith was not doing well, that maybe she needed to get to the hospital.
In the small suburb of Robinson, Texas, residents feel safe and secure in their tight-knit community. On an early November morning, the Gentry family learns that tragedy can strike anywhere, even when surrounded by family. Darlene Gentry wakes up to find her back door open and gun cabinet empty. She fears a burglar has gotten into her house in the night. Darlene finds her husband Keith in their bed, barely holding on to his life, with a bullet wound in his head. She calls 911, but can Keith survive?
Keith Gentry was transported to the hospital. The police then talked to Darlene and asked her to come down to the headquarters with them.
Darlene is brought to the police station to give her statement about the events of the morning.
Just as a matter of routine, Darlene was taken to the Robinson Police Department where she was being interviewed by police detectives.
Saw the blood on the sheets. Was there any weapons on the bed?
I honestly saw nothing other than just the foam coming out of his mouth, and I tried to shake him. When I tried to shake him, that's when I noticed something by his head, and I kind of leaned in more to look, and that's when I went to hollering at the kids, "Get out, get out, get out."
What did you see?
I just saw the red, and I automatically assumed it was blood just because, and so that's when I started calling, and it was just like I don't know.
While Keith is taken to the hospital and Darlene is interviewed, the police investigate the scene of the crime, on the lookout for any evidence of the burglary.
When the Robinson police detectives arrived, they called in the Texas Rangers.
Her story, of course, was it was a robbery. There was no evidence of a break-in. She said the guns had been stolen. There was no evidence that the gun case had been broken into, and nothing else was taken. And then to find the firearms stacked rather neatly on the lawn in front of the house, that didn't match anything that they had ever seen about a robbery.
Did you at any time touch him?
Well, I know I physically did. Like I shook his leg when I was trying to get his attention, but phone's in my pocket. I just turned it on.
The reason I asked is, we got some rangers at the house, some Texas Rangers. They're assisting with the crime scene stuff. They found what they think might be blood in the bathroom sink.
I don't know. As I said, I haven't, other than touching his leg, that is the only part I believe I touched of him.
So you don't remember going after touching maybe any bloody area?
No, I was literally, my cell phone was on my dresser, which is on his side of the bed. When I couldn't get him to respond to me, I turned directly from there, picked up the phone and, turned it on, and then, of course, had to wait for the service to hit 911.
The gun case was open, but it was unlocked with a key.
As authorities make their way through the house, questions about Darlene's story begin to percolate in their minds. And it isn't only the evidence found around the house that has them wondering.
The officers and their experience, even people with no medical training, try to at least do something to help a wounded spouse or a person. She had done nothing. She gave a story that she was probably in shock or something like that, but the fact that she did nothing was very suspicious to them.
Is Darlene too in shock to help her husband? Or could her inaction be a sign that something else is going on?
Keep in mind, a 911 operator is going to want her to do CPR because that's just how they're trained to do. And keeping also in mind that Darlene was a registered nurse at the time. But in order to properly do CPR, you have to pull someone off the bed because you cannot adequately do CPR in bed. You need to have a hard surface. But she never did that. She spoke to the dispatcher, the 911 operator, about how he was making a gurgling sound, and it just did not sound to the Robinson Police Department like she was as concerned or as frantic as what a normal spouse might have been when they found their husband dead in bed.
The search continues through the house, but as hard as they try, police can't find definitive evidence of any break-in having occurred.
I don't recall how long we had been there, but we'd been there quite a while because we were having to go from room to room. We have to search and look, and we were looking for fingerprints. We were looking for all evidence that might have bolstered what the wife had told us about the burglary, but we just could not find it.
That was my partner again. The detective I've got at the hospital said that they need the wife there to make some medical decisions on behalf of your husband. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if you'll just bear with me just a few more minutes, I'm going to get you to the hospital until I can sort through what's going on. Are you listening to me?
Yes, I'm listening.
Everyone's a suspect right now until I can determine how your husband suffered this gunshot wound. That's not to take away that he could have done it himself. You understand this?
Yes.
If there was a gun on that bed, you moved it to save his integrity or anything like that, I need to know now.
I did not move a gun.
Did you harm your husband?
No, I did not harm my husband.
You and I have been working, we've built a pretty good relationship here. I'm trying to figure out what happened.
I know.
That's all I'm trying to do right now.
Darlene was in the middle of her initial police interview down at the police station, and they called and said that Keith was not doing well and maybe she needed to get to the hospital.
Darlene's interview isn't over, but the police put it on hold after news of Keith's condition reaches the station.
They received a message from the hospital that her husband, Keith, was brain dead, and then took her to the hospital, and she signed the paperwork so that he would not be kept on life support.
Darlene is given time to sign the paperwork and say her goodbyes, but after things conclude at the hospital, she is brought back to the police department to continue her interview.
I'm just not doing this alone because I'm just...
Are you saying that you want to get an attorney?
Yes. My sisters are having a fit. They don't want me signing anything.
They continued to talk with her later in the day, and she began to feel that she was being interrogated and eventually invoked her right to cease the interrogation and leave.
I'm just afraid that I'm going to get, I'm trying to tell y'all exactly what I remember, and as I said, it's been a long day.
Sure.
And I
understand.
I don't want me trying to tell y'all something to turn around and it come out not exactly what I meant and basically bite me in the butt. Basically is what I don't want to happen.
We wouldn't let that happen to you, because if there's something we don't understand that you've said, we're going to ask you.
And I've tried to be straightforward and honest with everything that I'm telling y'all. And what I don't know, I'm telling you, I don't know.
Darlene Gentry wakes up early on a November morning. She finds the door open and the gun cabinet unlocked. She races to her husband Keith, but finds him shot in their bed. Keith is rushed to the hospital, but it isn't enough. When Darlene is told that he has been left brain dead, she signs off on removing him from life support. The Texas Rangers are brought in to investigate the burglary, but details aren't matching up. And when Darlene starts to feel interrogated, she asks for a lawyer and leaves the police station. Before Darlene gets back from the police station, the investigation in and around her home continues.
We did believe that one handgun was missing, and we searched for the handgun. We could not find it.
Later, when doing an inventory of the guns, found out that one of his guns was in fact missing. It was a .22 caliber 9-shot revolver. That was the only firearm in the house that could not be accounted for.
Police are able to talk to Keith's father to get more insight into the guns found in the front yard, confirming the missing gun's existence.
The father had given the gun to Keith, knew that he had it, and so they were able to make the determination that that gun was missing.
Meanwhile, one officer makes a very lucky discovery inside the house.
We assisted the Robinson Police Department with the examination of the crime scene, and through this investigation, one of the key pieces of evidence found by Robinson Police Detective Mike Noel was, as he was going through the kitchen trash can, he found a latex surgical glove.
The police requested that she would give them permission to search her house, which she did, and they found a latex glove similar to what a nurse would wear, and inside the glove was a .22 caliber shell that would have fit the revolver.
Now keep in mind, this glove was turned inside out as if it was being worn at the time when the shell casing was picked up. Turned inside out and then placed at the bottom of the trash can, and then what looked like a bunch of leftover food was piled on top of it, as if to hide the surgical glove and the shell casing.
The glove was taken to the crime lab along with the shell. They did DNA on it, and the DNA on the glove matched the DNA of Darlene Gentry. The glove was subsequently tested for gunshot residue, and it was found on it. Interestingly, the defense attorneys asked for that test to be run on it.
As for the bullet shell, firearms experts are able to confirm that the shell would come from the missing .22 caliber revolver. Although without the gun in question, there can be no way of connecting the two beyond it being just a possibility.
There was an autopsy done. The bullet was recovered from his head. The bullet was so badly damaged that they were not able to match it to the gun as far as being fired from the gun, but it was a .22 bullet and consistent with what could have been fired from that gun.
Between the lack of evidence of a burglary having taken place and the shell found in the latex glove, suspicion grows in Darlene's direction. But for some police officers, these suspicions begin much sooner.
Something stinks about this, Gary. I think she did it. Something ain't right here, man. I'm telling you.
Okay, what's the problem? I got it this morning. I was in my son's room because I didn't sleep. My back door was open. My husband's guns are all gone.
The interesting thing about the call was that was the order that everything was described to the 911 operator. Normally, if a person comes in and finds their spouse, mortally wounded, that's the first thing they're going to tell the operator. My husband is badly hurt. We need an ambulance out here. And instead, she went through this long scenario about walking around the house and the guns being missing, and the last thing that she got to was about her husband, and that made everybody very suspicious. It sounded like she was setting up an alibi in her call.
Oh, by the way, my husband's been shot. So it's almost like we call it in the newspaper business, she kind of buried the lead, but it appeared to the investigators early on that she was trying to set up her alibi, or, she went way in too much detail before she actually said, "Oh, my husband's been shot."
If Darlene could be responsible, there is still the question of why hanging in the air.
Keith and Darlene did have some financial problems. There were apparently other problems in the marriage as well. Keith had a fairly large insurance policy. I believe he may have actually had two of them, and it was in the area, I believe, of several $100,000.
You mentioned y'all were trying to save some money. Have y'all been having some financial problems?
Well, we're just, this third kid, and it's killing us, basically. So we've just been trying to butt heads, figure out which way, because of course we are getting behind on some bills, and it's just been one thing after another.
Police are able to uncover that Keith is under two life insurance policies. Together, they are worth approximately $750,000.
Darlene Gentry's behavior continued to be confusing. She started looking for land to purchase, and she was looking in an area of the county that was about as far away as you could get and still be inside the county. And it wasn't her home, it wasn't where she was used to living. It was a very rural area, and it would have been a long drive for her to go to work every day. But she was dealing with one man who was selling a 5-acre tract of land.
Shortly after her husband's death, there was a gentleman named Pavelka who she had been friendly with, and told him that she would like to move and was looking for a house. He had a house that next to it was a little pond, and she expressed a great deal of interest in the house and the pond, said that her husband had always liked to take the boys out to water sports, and that she thought it would really be nice to have this house with the pond.
Darlene realized it had a pond on it, and she go, "Well, that's perfect, because Keith had always wanted a place with a pond so he could take his three sons fishing."
So they negotiated prices, and she would come out and look at the land from time to time, and she asked his permission, would it be okay if she spent a little time out there? He says, "It's not a problem. Drive out and look at it anytime you like."
With the murder weapon still missing, there is no direct evidence to link anyone to the shooting of Keith Gentry. But as the circumstantial case continues to build, authorities believe Darlene is to blame. Nearly a month after Keith is shot, the police move to make an arrest.
I believe the crime occurred on November the 7th, and she was actually arrested November the 28th. Keith's father said they simply couldn't believe that she had done that.
Darlene Gentry told the man she wanted to buy the land, but she didn't want the pond anymore.
That kind of set in motion this scheme that the ranger had, so that she would go back out there.
The rangers then had set up a camera on the pond so a video could be recorded of what was happening there.
When Keith Gentry is shot in the middle of the night, the police begin to suspect Darlene, his wife, may be responsible.
Something stinks about this, Gary. I think she did it.
While their suspicions begin early on, the lack of a clear motive and the missing murder weapon keep them from closing the case. Meanwhile, Darlene looks for a new place to make a home, telling friends her current house is too full of awful memories after the shooting. While searching the Gentry residence, police find a spent shell casing for a .22 hiding inside a latex glove with Darlene's DNA. An arrest warrant is finally permitted, and Darlene is brought into custody nearly a month after Keith's death. But Darlene's arrest is short-lived.
Well, after she was arrested, Wayman Gentry, Keith's father, said that they simply couldn't believe that she had done that, and they were supportive of her and even helped her raise bail money.
Keith's parents raised the $50,000 necessary to get Darlene out on bail. When released from jail, Darlene pushes forward on buying the land she'd been shown before her arrest, only now she has an unusual request.
At some point during their negotiation, Darlene Gentry told the man she wanted to buy the land, but she didn't want the pond anymore. And the man thought that was strange because in Texas, anyone who buys a piece of property, they want water on it. Water is a commodity in Texas. So he was very confused about this, but he knew that she had also been arrested. So he contacted law enforcement and said, this woman who was arrested for killing her husband wants to buy my property. She wanted this pond, talked about how it was something she always wanted, but now she wants me to fill it in with dirt. He said, do you reckon she threw something into that pond? Well, we interviewed the man who owned the land, and we agreed that her behavior was suspicious at best. And we asked the man if it would be all right if we came out and looked in the pond. So myself and Ranger Foster, we contacted the state dive team. We made arrangements for them to come out and search the bottom of this body of water. It wasn't large, but it was big enough that it needed to be searched correctly. The dive team never even had to suit up. They waded out into the water. They saw what looked like maybe a stick in the water. They walked over to that stick about knee deep. They reached down and they pulled out a .22 caliber pistol.
In fairly short order, he was able to find a 9-shot .22 caliber revolver there in the water.
Within only 10 to 15 minutes, the dive team are able to locate the assumed murder weapon within the pond.
To begin with, the pistol itself was pristine. It was not covered in dirt or moss. It had not been there very long, and that was plainly obvious to all involved. We showed the weapon to Mr. Gentry, Keith Gentry's father, and he was able to positively identify it as a weapon that he had given his son at some point in time. So we now know that this is most likely the weapon that was missing from the house and probably the murder weapon.
With the bullet removed from Keith being too damaged to have an absolute confirmation that it must have been fired from a particular gun, authorities are left with only circumstantial evidence to link the gun to the shooting. It's the only gun missing from the Gentry residence after the shooting, matches the caliber of the bullet, and appears to have only been recently disposed of. Having found the missing firearm in a place where the evidence points most clearly to Darlene, the idea of what must have happened on the night of the shooting crystallizes in the minds of police. With no evidence of a break-in actually having occurred, Darlene is the only one who appears to have had the means to have gotten to the guns. Darlene may have put most of the guns on the lawn to create confusion, and interest in the pond could potentially be due to a plan to dispose of the murder weapon. Even as police and Texas Rangers come up with what they believe must have happened, they still have nothing concrete to say Darlene has to have been involved.
And I came up with the idea to tell the landowner, to tell Miss Gentry, that he would be willing to fill in that pond with dirt, but that he would be afraid that he would get his tractor stuck. So he was going to use a pump and drain the water out first.
That kind of set in motion this scheme that the ranger had, and just a plain a hunch that she would go back out there and try to find the gun.
The Rangers then had set up a camera on the pond so a video could be recorded of what was happening there.
606. We told her on one day, as I recall, and by the next day, about noon, she had driven out there by herself. We watched her put on rubber boots and reach into the back of her vehicle and get a probe of some sort. Then we turned the cameras on and watched her walk down the path to the pond, walk over to where the stick had been placed earlier, and start probing around in the water looking for something. And of course we knew what it was. She was looking for the weapon.
All of this was recorded, and her efforts to dig around in the pond with the stick were all videotaped and were absolutely on record.
With the video evidence of Darlene searching out the discarded pistol, the police have what they need to put this case to rest.
Robinson 911, what's your emergency?
It all starts with a 911 call from a scared wife reporting a burglary and her husband being shot. But as the authorities look into her story, they discover how full of lies it truly is. When the probable murder weapon is found in a pond, a sting operation is put together to link Darlene to the crime. The sting works, and Texas Rangers have video evidence of Darlene trying to retrieve the gun.
Darlene's case went to trial in February 2007, and it was a high-profile case. Lots of people jammed the courtroom, a lot of friends and family on both sides, but mainly Keith's side. Darlene's mother was there.
The thing is, it was a circumstantial case. Nobody could point at her and say they had seen her shoot her husband, Keith Gentry. Anytime a case is circumstantial, you always have some concern, as a jury going to convict somebody if you don't have eyewitness testimony. We felt that we had a strong case. The 911 call just went against all human experience. Nobody goes through a convoluted story about getting up and walking around and things being stolen and then wandering into a bedroom.
I got up this morning, I was in my son's room because I didn't sleep. My back door was open, my husband's guns are all gone, and there's blood on the bed and she's struggling.
then and only then saying, my husband's got a bullet wound in his head. Our life experience says that when somebody finds their spouse terribly wounded, first thing they're going to do is call and say, my spouse is terribly hurt and I need an ambulance here as quickly as possible, which is exactly what she didn't do. Three things that were really strong for us and we felt confident about. The first was the lead-in, the 911 call. Then the fact that the missing gun was later found in the pond, and then she went out and was digging around trying to find it. How would she ever have known that the gun was there if she had not been the one that shot him and then concealed the gun and then later threw it in the pond?
Later, her explanation was that she heard a rumor that the gun was there, and she wanted to be the one to find it and turn it into the police to help them find the real killer.
The interesting part of that is that the defense never even cross-examined on the video. They didn't talk about it. They just pretty much acted like it didn't happen.
After laying out all the evidence of Darlene's guilt, the question of why she did it still remains unanswered.
We were never able to make a determination that the killing was to get the policy. If it had been determined that that was the motive for the killing, it would have been a capital murder and she would have been possibly facing the death penalty. But there was no evidence that that was the motive for the killing. As defense attorneys will frequently do, tried to minimize everything that was negative toward her. They were trying to say that she was just sort of in shock at the house, and that's why she said what she did on the tape. Then with the gun, they played up, as we expected them to, that it was a circumstantial case, that no one had seen Darlene commit the crime. And then also, they tried to point the fingers somewhat at Pavelka and were trying to give the idea that maybe he's the one that had gotten hold of the gun and was trying to set her up for some reason.
After only 5 hours of deliberations, the jury reaches their conclusion. They find Darlene guilty of murder.
The final verdict in Darlene Gentry's trial was she was found guilty of the murder of her husband, Keith Gentry. She received about a 66 or so year sentence, and she's currently serving that sentence in state prison here in Texas.
Here in Texas, murder is a first-degree felony, and the punishment range is from 5 years to 99 years or life.
We believe that the verdict was just, and we believe that justice was served. Kind of a backstory to this is that she did not like the fact that we videotaped her looking for that weapon in that pond. It just wrecked her whole theory that she was an innocent victim also, and that she had nothing to do with this.
While Keith's parents don't want to believe at first that Darlene could be responsible for the death of their son, it is in part because of Keith's father identifying the gun that the case is able to be solved.
Through the course of seeing what the evidence was, they became convinced that she had, in fact, murdered their son. And, of course, they were very bitter, would be the right word about that. They wanted her to get the maximum, to be in prison, and also not to be able to have any contact with the grandchildren.
Keith's parents are given custody of their grandchildren after Darlene is found guilty.
She got exactly what she deserved. She took the life of a man who did nothing but love her. She took away the father of 2 little boys, and they took away the son to a mother and a father who loved him. And they had invested their whole life into this family, Keith and Darlene. So she is where she needs to be, and she'll be there until she's not so pretty anymore.
We were, of course, satisfied. We were ourselves convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that she was guilty, of course.
I think the community thought it was just. I mean, if you kill your husband while he's sleeping, that's a pretty cold thing to do, and you should go to prison for a long time for that.
I'll say this. This is the perfect example of how law enforcement can work when they work together. The fact that her DNA was found on a glove wrapped around a shell casing that belonged to the weapon that was found in the water, that's just good, solid police work on the part of Mike Noel, who took it upon himself to get his hands dirty and get inside a trash can. And without that, and without the video, Darlene Gentry might have gotten away with this.
Phoenix, Arizona, 2005. The busy western city is getting ready for another summer of fun.
It was too damn hot. And then we had two little stories that made it a whole lot hotter.
It starts out horrific and just keeps getting worse.
These were bizarre incidents. People were terrified.
Bodies are hitting the ground again and again. Every day is a nightmare. Nobody knows who's safe.
I think everybody, including the cops, were a little blown away.
They shoot dogs, they shoot horses. Any living, breathing creature is fair game. And now they think there's more than one. That's just a start.
Phoenix, the capital and most populous city in the state of Arizona. The city is nestled in the northeastern reaches of the Sonoran Desert, but that hasn't deterred anyone from flocking here.
They call it the Valley of the Sun, and it encompasses about a half dozen cities, and you wouldn't know if you were in one or the other one unless you lived there. They all sprawl together.
In 2005, the locals find themselves fearing for their lives.
I think there was some period of time where we sort of this growing apprehension that this is going exactly where we all think it's going, and it's really bad.
In the nearby suburb of Tolleson, home to almost 5,000 residents, a dark presence is lurking. A presence ready and willing to take an innocent life. At first, it's random dog shootings. Then, they shoot a horse. Police don't know what to make of the animals being shot at for no reason.
So this little tiny town adjacent to Phoenix has a lot of horse properties and is basically kind of a rodeo town. And someone started shooting the horses that lived in people's front yards and in their backyards.
A horse is gunned down by a .22 caliber rifle. Police must uncover if this is a random attack or part of a bigger scheme if they hope to find the shooter.
These random shootings are taking place, and it's even more unnerving to know that they were animals. Why would somebody do this?
And don't forget, there was also different jurisdictions, so it's hard to see the big picture if you only have one or two cases.
Just these random dogs and horses that were just outside. They were easy targets.
But as the moon appears in the night sky, a dark and unnerving night is only beginning. Later that same night, things escalate.
David Estrada was a beloved young man. He had a mother who doted on him and several sisters who treated him like the pet of the family. He was musical and he was bright and he was movie star handsome. He was struggling to find his way as he approached adulthood. He left home and was living on the streets with his guitar and had a goal to make it to California, San Francisco. David was not an untethered person. He had people who wanted to take care of him. But David was following the beat of his own path and happened to be on a sidewalk that night, sleeping under the stars, something he liked to do.
Estrada has set up camp outside a bus stop nearby, and he sees a car slowly creeping up.
And someone drove up alongside him and shot him.
It's just an act of sheer cowardice on the shooter's part. Estrada was gunned down in cold blood. If it's indeed the same shooter, they've stepped up their game. You know, shooting a random horse is one thing, but killing a person randomly at a bus stop is on a whole nother level. It's almost as if the shooter was trying to get up the nerve to kill a person by shooting the horse first.
Detective Ron Rock from the Tolleson Police Department came to the murder scene of David Estrada that night, and there was change on the sidewalk next to him, money. There was a nice quality guitar nearby. So he looked at this and said, this isn't a robbery. This is not someone who came up to him and said, give me all your money or take all your valuables. So Ron Rock, to his credit, knew there was something distinct about this murder.
Well, it appears as though they drove up and offered him some change and then shot him in the face. But there's no indication or no clue as to why they did this.
Officers make a critical discovery: bullet slugs from inside the victim. The slugs are sent to the police crime lab for further analysis.
And it was, devastating to come outside in the morning and find your horse bleeding or lying on the ground dead. But these seemed isolated because it didn't have anything to do with Phoenix. It seemed like a small town case. There was a Burger King that got shot out, a murder on a sidewalk somewhere that seemed puzzling, but no one was connecting the dots.
Police discovered that the .22 caliber bullet casings that were found at the scenes where the horses and dogs were shot came from the same gun responsible for the killing of David Estrada. A profile is beginning to emerge, but will it hold up?
Exotic dancer Georgia Thompson is walking through her apartment parking lot after a late-night shift. She hears someone behind and yells at them to leave her alone, but is shot dead at point-blank range with a .38 caliber handgun. Police are perplexed. Are these crimes connected? When they look at what's happening in the city, they realize that just a few weeks earlier, a sexual assault occurs in the same area.
They were walking home and forced these two young women behind some bushes and made them undress. One of the young women was visibly pregnant.
Then, a week later, there is another sexual assault, but this one combined with a robbery. Police question locals to see if anyone has seen or heard anything. But aside from Georgia's screams moments before her death, they have nothing to go on. They plead with citizens to provide any information that can lead to an arrest.
No one could have imagined that this is just the beginning.
3 men were found shot, 2 dead in downtown Phoenix.
In the wake of so many killings, the community was just on razor's edge.
If the citizens of Phoenix were scared before, they're absolutely terrified now.
Disturbing crimes are happening around Phoenix, Arizona. Women have been sexually assaulted, and 1 murdered, and several people have been shot, randomly targeted at night, along with several dogs and horses. Using ballistic evidence, police have discovered that the same gun is used in both the David Estrada murder and the animal killings. It appears they have a serial shooter on their hands. Over the next few weeks, more incidents occur. Sexual assaults and robberies are becoming commonplace. Shortly before 10 p.m., a dog named Shep is killed. And another named Irving is shot and wounded by a .22 caliber rifle within a few blocks of each other, just north of Camelback Road in Glendale.
One of the major differences between being able to compare a .22 caliber bullet casing from that of a shotgun, for example, a .410, is that a .22 caliber casing can be matched to the firearm that actually shot it. This is very difficult, almost impossible to do with a shotgun shell.
As the canine body count rises, so too does the human count.
Nathaniel Schaffner went to a convenience store one night. He walked over, and as he walked away from the convenience store, got a few blocks away, he came upon a scene where there was a car pulled over in a dark street, and there was a gun coming out of the window, and the barrel of this gun was pointing at a stray dog that was innocently capering about the scene, trying to find something to eat. Nathaniel came up to the car and, in an angry way, said a lot of things to stop them from shooting the dog. Don't shoot that dog. So what happened? The men in the car shot Nathaniel instead. Sometime later, an off-duty police officer was coming home from a social occasion with his wife late at night, and as he turns down the street, his headlights light up a man laying in the street with liquid all around him. He thinks what anyone would think, this is a man who's passed out, and that's beer. And he didn't have all his equipment with him, didn't have his uniform. He didn't feel like he was the right person to handle it, but he did call it in. Paramedics arrived, and they leaned over Nathaniel Schaffner, and they said, "Oh, this isn't beer, this is blood." So Nathaniel Schaffner died protecting a stray dog.
At 6 p.m., 39-year-old Tina Washington is attacked and killed.
Even by a veteran cop's standards, it was a terrible scene.
A witness who manages to hide behind a steel door.
But the man, in his terror, was unable to give them a good description. That crime scene was very valuable to police because they found a shell casing. But the savvy detectives there at the scene noticed that she seemed to have no jewelry. Turns out that Tina Washington had what was called a mother's ring. That was gone. One of the sons told police that that was missing.
Police wondered if these killings might be connected, changing weapons for different scenarios. For example, using a handgun when he's on foot, or when he's in his car using a rifle or a shotgun. But this all changes on December 29th, 2005.
At 7 p.m., the shooting starts. First, it's a bartending school, but no one is hurt. Then, at 10:10 p.m., a dog is killed while being walked by its owner at a park. 20 minutes later, Jose Ortiz is killed on North 10th Avenue in Phoenix, and Marco Carrillo is shot and killed 1 block away. At 11:39 p.m., Timothy Torde is shot in the neck and wounded nearby. Shortly after midnight, 2 dogs are shot and killed on East Granada. A German Shepherd is also killed on North 32nd Street. At 2:15 a.m., an off-duty Marine is shot and wounded.
I think you could say the official start of the serial shooter case was December 29th, 2005. This is when 3 men were found shot, 2 dead in downtown Phoenix. And the detective working that case the next morning got a call from a detective from a tiny little police department in a tiny little town adjacent to Phoenix who said, "You know, I have an unsolved case from earlier in the year. This sounds an awful lot like your case last night."
Overwhelmed with bodies and ballistics, detectives soon make a startling discovery. All of the victims of the drive-by rifle shootings are males and animals. and all of their handgun victims are female.
This changes everything. It's definitely a breakthrough in their investigation.
Could there be two active serial killers on the loose, both operating at the same time?
We were hearing police say serial killer, not serial killer. Oh, it's a rapist, it's this, it's that. We didn't know what was going on. If you were just a regular person not privy to everything that was happening inside the police department, you didn't know what was going on. All you knew is that you were frightened.
If the citizens of Phoenix were scared before, they're absolutely terrified now. Anything and anyone could be next.
Starting in early summer of 2005, a reign of terror has been waged over the residents of metropolitan Phoenix, Arizona. On the fateful night of December 29th, 2005, a rampage leaves 2 men dead, along with several other dogs and a wounded ex-Marine. All shot with either a .22 caliber rifle or a .410 shotgun from a passing vehicle. While these instances occur in a similar pattern, at the same time, a serial predator is haunting the areas around Baseline Road. These crimes are done on foot, using a handgun. With already 7 instances, including robbery, rape, and murder, the profiles of the separate instances indicate their worst fears. 2 separate serial killers are at work in Arizona.
Now the police are dealing with what are believed to be 2 active serial killers. They need to work around the clock to try to catch them. They decided to break the unit into 2 groups. One dedicated to catching who they called the serial shooter. The other group was dedicated to catching who they called the Baseline rapist. The Baseline rapist came to be known as the Baseline killer because the victims were killed in the area of Baseline Road.
Authorities discover evidence that could further the Baseline killer case.
It's a gunshot fired off by the rapist to scare away onlookers that conclusively ties the assaults and robberies to the murders. The police are able to match the casings to the .38.
The rapist murderer was doing everything in his power to prevent any DNA evidence from showing up at his crime scenes, from attempting to use condoms, to making the victims rub their saliva with dirt and then rubbing it over their own bodies to basically pollute any DNA that he may have left on them.
But for as carefully as he tries to cover his tracks, the Baseline killer soon slips up. Detectives are able to recover DNA evidence from one of the previous sexual assaults. Now they have a lead. But as much as detectives learn over the course of their investigation, in 2006, his pace of assaults picks up. 18 separate attacks take place, which are all attributed to the Baseline killer. That number rises to 23 over the next several months.
February 2006 proved to be a very bloody and terrible time. 2 women, hardworking women working in a food truck, Romelia Vargas and Myrna Palma Roman. These 2 women were found brutally murdered early one morning inside their food truck. And then March comes along, and another one of those headline-grabbing, gut-punching stories. You had 2 young workers at a Yoshi's restaurant, George Chow and Lilian Sanchez. They were closing down. These 2 young people murdered by what was now identified, and police were looking for the serial rapist and murderer. And shortly after that, a woman named Sofia Nunez was found dead in her bathtub, found by her young son, who was worried about his mom when she didn't come to school to pick him up.
The community is at wit's end, dealing with seemingly weekly events of new deaths and assaults. Authorities make pleas to the public to come forward if they know anyone or anything that could lead them to the killers.
The officers in the community feel helpless because people that they're sworn to protect are being targeted. All they can do at this point is hope that they collect enough evidence fast enough to bring the case to a conclusion.
Meanwhile, the so-called serial shooter hasn't struck since that fateful December 29, 2005 night. And police still haven't been able to get a description of the shooter's car. It could be anyone. The summer of fear starts when Claudia Gutierrez Cruz is shot and killed on May 2nd with a shotgun.
She'd gone in for an extra shift as a glass stacker at a restaurant in Scottsdale because she thought they might need extra help because there had been sort of a strike that night. And they said, you know what, I think we got it covered, you can go. And she came home on the bus, but the connecting bus, it was too late. So she had to walk where the further bus left her off, all the way to her apartment. And she died.
That same night, 17-year-old Kabili Tambadu is shot and wounded.
He had been sent to the store that night to pick up some milk at the convenience store, so that's why he was on the sidewalk that night. And he was shot in the back. And the 17-year-old boy who's made it all the way to America from a very troubled, traumatic background from a war-torn country in Africa, Sierra Leone, staggers from the sidewalk through the bushes into the marble floors of a hotel and drips blood with him across their marble floors and asks for help.
Over the next 2 months, the carnage holds the city hostage. During this shooting spree, 2 Walmarts are set ablaze. Adding to the general carnage that Phoenix residents are dealing with, little do police know that these fires will be key later.
It was really scary living in the Phoenix area at that time because you had 2 serial killers working at the same time. I personally am unaware of that happening, at least not commonly anywhere before. Employers were putting up flyers, do not go to your car alone. People stopped jogging, all of this, because it was just too frightening. And, you know, with good reason. People were dying and being maimed and traumatized. It was horrifying.
Detectives set up a tip line in the hopes of gaining vital information that will help them capture the serial shooter. And they get no shortage of calls, straining their resources as they try to make sense of all the leads. And just when people start thinking it can't get any worse, it does. The baseline killer strikes again, but this time for all to see.
Then along comes June 29th, in the summer of 2006. A young woman named Carmen Miranda is washing her car. Not only do they get their first sort of look at this guy, they get their eyes on the body of this guy. And as shocking as anything was just the violence and the speed of the attack. It visually confirmed what all of these other crime scenes had told police, that this was really just a ferocious, scary predator. Because he set upon this woman with such speed and such force, threw her into the car, drove her off, sexually assaulted her, killed her, her body found a short time later. In the wake of so many killings at this point, the community was just on razor's edge.
But authorities won't have time to rest. Another killer is on the loose. And July 1st, he strikes again. This time wounding Diane Bien and Jeremy Ortiz in 2 separate instances that night. With so many shootings, how can there be no witnesses?
One of the most effective things about the serial shooter style of mayhem was they took people from behind and people who weren't expecting to be assaulted. And this is why they had very little witness testimony, because people are just walking down the street and they get shot from behind and they never see what happened.
27-year-old Ashley Armenta is walking down the street when the assault happens.
When Ashley came into the hospital that night and they picked out the pellets from her scalp and police interviewed her, Ashley knew a lot about cars in general. She knew all about the model, make, year, everything. So she had a good idea of what the car was.
A light blue 1998 Toyota Camry. Despite other victims' descriptions, Ashley's is the first definitive answer to make and model of the vehicle.
One thing that was difficult for police is that when they did get a description of the car, people reported different colors. The paint on that particular car showed different in different light. It had different mixtures of paint in it, and different ones, purple, blue, gray, showed up in different light. So that explained why the color seemed different to different people.
Then, just a few days later, more carnage on the 12th of July, when Raul Lopez Garcia is shot while riding his bike in Mesa. Just when they could use a break in the serial shooter's case, a lead comes in. A phone call that will change the course of the investigation. There are 2 active serial killers on the loose in Phoenix, Arizona. The serial shooter shoots unsuspecting pedestrians and cyclists, while the baseline killer commits rapes and murders, centering his attacks largely on and around Baseline Road.
The crimes that were committed by this serial shooter were very senseless. You couldn't put a motive to it. Who was going to shoot someone's dog at the end of the leash that they're walking? Who was going to shoot a horse in someone's backyard? Who was going to shoot a guy sitting on a bus bench? Who was going to shoot a guy trying to protect a dog? These are senseless. A rape case is very specific. The motivation is obvious.
The serial shooter victims have all been shot with a .22 caliber rifle or a .410 or 12 gauge shotgun from a moving vehicle identified as a late 90s Camry. The baseline killer uses a handgun.
With video evidence recovered from the previous attack of the baseline killer, police are able to release a composite sketch to the public. He appears in the video to be an African-American male.
The informant that really broke the case of the serial shooter was a man named Ron Horton. And Ron Horton was an old drinking buddy of Sam Deaton.
Sam was from the Midwest. He was from Minnesota, where he grew up, and his mother at times had come out here to Phoenix. As an adult, he became a union electrician, so he could work a good job, but he had trouble with his temper and his reliability, so he lost his union job. Ron Horton wasn't the kind of guy who watched news or read newspapers, so he wasn't really aware very much of the whole serial shooter crisis in the area. But one night, he was at a bar with his friend Sam, and Sam said the strangest thing to him. He said, "Have you ever killed a man?"
Sammy apparently was one of those kind of guys when he got a belly full of beer, he shot his mouth off too much, and apparently had boasted to Ron that he had shot people.
Ron says, "No, what are you talking about?" And he noted this and thought this was really odd. Later, he did become aware of the serial shooter case, and in fact, a picture of Sam was circulated on the news from the Walmart fire. In June of 2006 was a bad month and a particularly bad night. There was a Walmart that was set on fire in the west side of the valley. One thing about Walmart is it has really good asset management, really good security. So they have cameras all throughout their stores. So the night of those 2 fires, they had people reviewing the video from every single camera, and they were able to determine that 2 guys probably set both fires, and they were able to take stills from the video, supply those to the police, which had them circulated on media. So now we had a picture of 2 guys with a distinctive tattoo and a distinctive T-shirt circulating for people to possibly recognize them. And Ron was fearful that maybe Sam was the guy in the picture, but he was divided because in his social circle, you don't snitch. And he felt really bad about maybe getting Sam into some trouble for no reason.
Ron didn't immediately act on this, and I think, as he would say himself, to his great regret. But in short order, after Ron had been told by Sam of the killings, a young woman named Robin Blasnick ends up being shot and killed in Mesa, Arizona. All the earmarks of the serial shooter
Robin Blasnick was killed on the last day of July, and it was a fever pitch. I think everyone really felt electrified by Robin because she was such a vulnerable young girl that everyone felt like she was their daughter, their sister, and we thought, we can't take any more of this.
Ron Horton hears about the killing of Robin Blasnick. He thinks about his friend Sam Dietman talking about going around killing people. At that point, Ron Horton calls police and says, I think my friend Sam Dietman had something to do with this. Police then ask Horton to set up a meeting with Sammy Dietman. They meet at a place called the Stardust Inn, a little bar on the west side. Police set up a surveillance, and they wait for Sam Dietman to show up.
They asked Ron to particularly tell Sam that he could not give him a ride home, that he'd have to have someone come pick him up. They waited till Ron left, and Sam was waiting for his ride, and they saw this car drive up and pick up Sam, and it sure looked like the other guy in the photo.
A guy named Del Hausner. And that is the first time cops had the name Del Hausner, but one of the lead investigators say he was sitting in that parking lot, and when he saw that Camry pull in, he said, we got our guys.
Dale had 2 marriages under his belt. He moved on with other girlfriends, and he now had a little baby daughter with another woman. He was working for the city of Phoenix at the airport as a janitor.
Dale also works as a boxing photojournalist. He loves to feel like he's in the middle of big things.
From the moment Sam was picked up that night at the bar, those 2 men were never alone. They had a tale for the next 3 days of their lives.
They have a GPS monitoring device on Hausner's car, and Sam and Dale are just driving around aimlessly with cops following them.
The 2 men continue driving around Phoenix under police surveillance.
So they observed the car slowing down when there was a lone pedestrian. And so their strategy to prevent someone getting shot while they were watching was to speed up and get close and act like they were going to witness it, because they didn't have any way of stopping a shooting. They followed them back to an apartment in Mesa. And they had an emergency meeting with the county attorney to get an emergency warrant to do a bug in the apartment.
They went to the apartment next door, put up a monitoring device so they could listen to their audio.
They have a lot of surveillance on the apartment, and at one point they have Sam come out and take the trash, a trash bag from inside the apartment to the dumpster. One of the guys who's been hiding in the bushes jumps into the dumpster and pulls out that trash bag, and they hightail it down to downtown Phoenix to go through the bag. And what they find in it is further confirmation that they have the right guys. They find a map that's marked up with the sites of the murders. They have a soda can, pick it up, it rattles, dump it out. What's in there? A .410 shell.
The police want to make a move, but there's a problem. An unexpected person is at the apartment with them.
A complication has come up, and that is that during the time of the surveillance, Dale has picked up a very small child, about 2 years old, and brought it home with him. This is his own daughter, it turns out. And what was really awful on the tapes of the bug, they hear Dale teaching his daughter just to laugh about the killings.
Good night, Sam. Night. See you in the morning. See you in the morning. They don't kill anybody.
They can't do a raid with a baby inside there, so now they have to regroup. What are they going to do?
Anytime officers gather for the purpose of doing a forceful entry to execute a search warrant or effect an arrest of a suspect, they would have to do a risk assessment. They would have to do surveillance on the property to determine if the subject that they're looking for is present and who else may be present, and that would include the presence of children. And they would have to weigh very carefully whether or not it was worth taking the risk that an innocent child may be injured in order to continue their investigation at that point. If officers determine that a child is present and there is a person of interest or a suspect who may be armed and dangerous in that location, most often we would expect that they would continue the investigation, continue surveillance, and attempt to make that arrest at a time where there's less risk to innocent people.
But can this tactic work until they lawfully arrest the killers? Arizona resident Ron Horton has just heard some disturbing news. A longtime drinking buddy, Sam Dietman, has boasted that he and his friend may be the serial shooters. Ron has no choice but to let police know. Now, police are following Sam and his friend Dale Hausner, who are cruising around in a vehicle that matches the description given by witnesses to belong to the serial shooter. Police rush to get the necessary warrants together to bring the two men down.
So this is a very harrowing night for the cops. And they also had a helicopter overhead that was observing them. And when someone on the ground could not get close enough to the car to prevent a potential shooting, they actually had the helicopter buzz the car, fly low, so that the shooters would look up and go, oh, better not do it right now.
I know that one of the investigators who was there that night following this said it was one of the worst nights of his life because he felt as if he was following two known killers who were looking for another victim, and the police still needed to do their investigation, and their biggest concern was they were going to pull a gun out the window, and before the police could interact or intervene, another victim was going to go down.
After 2 days of surveillance and everything is in its place and the circumstances that are necessary have presented themselves, it's time to bring this nightmare that is the serial shooter to an end.
Once they identified these guys and got the audio from the neighboring apartment and all the evidence, they rounded these two guys up and hauled them downtown and booked them.
The things they find inside the apartment are telling. There are guns, ammunition, and even a scrapbook of news clippings following the investigation of the serial shooter and the baseline killer.
When police executed the raid at the Mesa apartment of Dale Hausner, they found a treasure trove of information, including a whole slew of weapons, I believe about a dozen firearms. They ended up doing, I think, most of the last shootings with a shotgun. They found a shotgun and shells and casings and all kinds of ammunition. So, they were not wanting for evidence in terms of firearms and ballistics.
Police search Hausner's car and find even more evidence that Hausner and Dietman are indeed the serial shooters that have plagued the Phoenix area for the past year. The city is elated, but Dale Hausner refuses to take responsibility for the murders.
You guys have never been together doing anything violent together?
No, hell no, no way. No. As far as I know, no, it's not as far as I know, it's absolutely not, no, as far as any violence with us together, no.
But Sam Dietman has a different version of events.
We had heading up, I don't know what the heck it was, 32nd or 44th Street or something. So he's like, well, sit back. I'm like, all right, why? And the window starts going down. Bought this little shotgun and fired at some fat guy who was walking down the road.
I think you're the mastermind of this entire operation, and have been from the get-go. But you involved Sam, and I think he was willing to go along.
He's shooting people, it's not with me.
No, it is with you.
Dale promptly held himself a news conference, which was a great spectacle. Dale Hausner wanted very much to be a talk show host or a circus ringleader. And a very flamboyant character, loved to talk.
On August 7th, 2006, Hausner goes public with a press conference declaring his innocence.
Why I'm here is because I have Sam Dietman staying with me for about 5 weeks. And apparently at night, Sam had been taking my car out and using various weapons that I have in my house to commit crimes. And apparently they tracked it to my car. And when they came and busted in the house, I was there, and I guess I'm just guilty by association, even though I did not shoot anybody or kill anybody.
Dale Hausner could be what is described as a classic narcissist. He refuses to accept any responsibility. He's self-focused. He lacks empathy.
I mean, it could be anybody. I mean, I don't know, but the person's got to be smart, you know, I mean, because they've been getting away with this for a long time.
Just over a month later, the citizens of Phoenix, Arizona are handed another arrest. With DNA evidence from one of the rapes, in conjunction with the ring taken from Tina Washington's body and traces of her blood found on one of his shoes, the baseline killer is identified as ex-con and current construction worker Mark Goudreau. He is convicted of 9 murders among 90 charges. He is sentenced to 438 years in his first trial for rape and robbery, and finally to death on March 16, 2007. In the face of his crimes, Sam Dietman confesses to his involvement with the serial shooting and agrees to testify against Dale Hausner.
He flipped so quickly that night because I think he was not only tired of the crime spree, but I think he was tired of Dale. So when the police arrested the both of them, it was Sam's opportunity to get out from under the thumb of Dale and just get away from all of it, all the crimes and Dale.
Dale Hausner goes to trial on October 6, 2008. In a desperate attempt to get the audio evidence thrown out, Hausner's lawyer goes after the emergency wiretaps issued without a judge's permission. But the state prosecutor takes the stand to defend police's actions.
They had followed this vehicle. They were making wide U-turns. They were stopping at empty lots and behaving in a manner as if they might be casing various areas looking for people. I felt that it was necessary to act promptly to stop the killing.
Despite the defense's concerns, the recordings are played for all present to hear, and what the court hears is shocking.
They heard these two guys, these two knuckleheads, talking about news coverage and yucking it up about shooting people.
Oh my God, she looks familiar. Oh, Blasnick? I don't think so. I know what Blasnick.
They were mocking the death throes of their victims. They were congratulating each other on getting a higher number of murders.
It's now bringing their total to 6. And it's higher than that.
The state has heard enough. Dale Hausner is sentenced.
Of the 87 charges brought against Hausner, he's convicted of 80.
Despite appeals in 2008 and 2012, the convictions are upheld against Dale Hausner.
Dale was a wannabe. Boxing promoter, big guy, man about town. Even as a serial killer, he wanted to be a big timer. There was never a moment where Dale said, I did this, and I'm sorry. Those are the kind of statements that may actually mean something to victims. Dale never had the fortitude to do that.
On June 19, 2013, Dale Hausner commits suicide by overdosing on antidepressants in his jail cell.
Phoenix is a pretty mobile city. A lot of people move in, a lot of people move out. The fact is, the people who are new here didn't know who he was, didn't really care. And those of us who did know, we already knew we were safe from him. You want to do a big dramatic gesture and kill yourself? Knock yourself out. Who cares? You're irrelevant now. And I think that is the worst possible hell Dale could have, is not to be important anymore.
Now, over 15 years later, the reign of terror and the summer of fear is a distant memory. The people of these communities have moved on and rebirthed themselves in the Valley of the Sun. mother and daughter's tense relationship boils over. The daughter leaves home, then disappears.
We track down family members, close friends.
2 weeks later, the runaway's mother also disappears.
Whoever has my sister, please let her go. That's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here.
Only one woman is found alive.
We had numerous investigators out there with crime scenes sifting through dirt for 3 days.
Detectives are determined to bring the killer to justice, no matter how long it takes. Alton, Illinois is an all-American town on the Mississippi, just upriver from St. Louis. It's around 3 in the afternoon at the Eunice Smith Nursing Home, where 47-year-old Bonnie Woodward, a hard-working nurse and mother of 4, is finishing up her day. A long staff meeting has kept her there later than usual, and she seems eager to leave. However, Bonnie doesn't arrive home that afternoon.
Everyone in Bonnie's family, they were suspicious. This was not like her behavior.
Her boyfriend, Gary, has been waiting for hours, and all of his anxious calls go straight to voicemail. Though usually home by 3, Bonnie sometimes joins her sister to unwind during happy hour. But tonight, as the clock ticks well past the dinner hour and closer to last call, Gary grows increasingly anxious.
And it was family members that went looking for Bonnie when she did not come home from work.
He heads to several local bars, scanning the parking lot, hoping that he might spot her truck. But he doesn't find it, so Gary heads home, hoping that Bonnie simply lost track of time and that she'll be home soon. Gary is frantic when the phone rings around 6 a.m. Given the hour, he hopes that Bonnie has a good explanation for why she didn't return home. But there's an unexpected voice on the other end of the line. It's Bonnie's boss, wondering why she hasn't shown up for work.
She wouldn't have just disappeared. She had children in the home. One had disabilities, and she checked in regularly. She was a woman who had the same job for a couple of decades, only called in sick 2 or 3 times, just not a person that would normally go off the radar. So that's what led the police to suspect that there was foul play.
Gary does the only thing he could think to do: go to the place where Bonnie was last seen. Much to his shock, Bonnie's truck is still parked in the employee lot, and he spots something off. Bonnie has left her windows down, something she would never do. So, Gary goes to alert the police.
Her boyfriend at the time, Gary Wilmerth, reported her as a missing person to us. And at that point, the patrol officers notified our detective division due to some circumstances in the case that were concerning. And a few detectives started coming out and working down some leads on trying to find her.
Detective Mike O'Neill with the Alton Police Department takes in the information about Bonnie's disappearance. At first, Detective O'Neill wonders if Bonnie just might be taking some time for herself.
More often than not, if a person is missing, it's usually not a suspicious circumstance thing where there's foul play. It's they left to go do something, didn't tell anybody about it, or they just need to get away for a little bit.
When Detective O'Neill reaches out to close friends and family, everyone insists Bonnie would never leave without any notice.
It really struck people that this was not Bonnie Woodward. This was not like her to just disappear. She had a family at home. Things were very routine with her, with being at work and returning home. and this was very out of character.
Shocked by her sudden disappearance, Bonnie's family pleads for her safe return.
Whoever has my sister, please let her go.
You let my sister go, and I'll come and get her. I want my sister.
Investigators take a closer look at the man who reports Bonnie missing, her boyfriend, Gary.
A lot of times if there is foul play in a situation like this, it's usually somebody that would know that person.
They tracked a lot of people down. She was living with her boyfriend at the time. They interviewed him extensively.
If Bonnie took off, it's only been, I'm thinking, once or twice. She went 2 blocks over to the bar and called me up and said, I'm going to have me a couple drinks and chill out or whatever. And
on the day this happened, which was within the 25th, right, roughly?
Right.
Did you go anywhere at all around the time that she would have been home from work?
No. I was there. Her daughter was at the house.
But an alibi is only good if it checks out. So Detective O'Neill must speak with the person Gary claims he was with, Bonnie's daughter, Jennifer.
Where were you at Friday? When this all came up?
Me and Gary and my little brother Aaron and my kids were at my mom's house waiting for her.
Did Gary ever leave?
No.
No. Does he drive? Does Gary drive?
No, he don't have a vehicle to drive.
Okay.
He never left. He was home all day long.
With Gary's alibi verified, Detective O'Neill moves quickly to figure out who was the last person to see Bonnie leaving work.
I drove by her work, and her truck was sitting out there. And I asked him, I was just like, is Bonnie Woodward still working by any chance? Maybe she worked over. And they're like, no, we seen her leave earlier, around, a little bit after the work meeting.
He soon learns that Bonnie's co-worker saw something out of the ordinary. Bonnie getting into a silver sedan.
I saw him and Bonnie out there, and for some, I didn't see anything strange, but it kind of seemed strange because I guess I had never seen the man before. He was a white male. He looked like he wasn't very tall, maybe 5'8", 5'9" or so. His hair was a salt and pepper, more grayer than black.
She also noticed that this person was associated to a silver or gray Chevrolet Malibu that he had on the parking lot at the time.
It's not much to go on, but it makes Detective O'Neill wonder if Bonnie might have had a new love interest spicing up her life. Or perhaps she was meeting a former flame.
There were a lot of members of her family who talked about an ex-boyfriend that she had, and that's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here.
Then we get the lead that cracks this thing wide open.
"47-year-old nurse Bonnie Woodward is last seen getting into a silver car with an unknown man. The clock is ticking as Detective O'Neill tries to locate the missing woman, who has seemingly vanished without a trace in the small town of Alton, Illinois. But he must also consider that Bonnie may not be missing at all. She might be having an affair.
There were a lot of members of her family who talked about an ex-boyfriend that she had.
A week before she disappears, Bonnie sends a friend request on social media to an old boyfriend. But this isn't just any old boyfriend. It's Bonnie's first love that at the time turned into a long, tumultuous relationship.
They interviewed him as well.
But it turns out to be a short interview.
Did you talk to Bonnie? No, she just wanted to, be my friend on Facebook, and I just accepted her. Other than that, I had no communications with her.
Officers learn he last saw Bonnie in 2002, and he doesn't own a silver sedan. The recent friend request is just a curiosity about an old flame. Bonnie's daughter, Jennifer, has an idea who it might be. Her mom's ex-boyfriend,
My mom is not the type of person that's just going to hop in the car with somebody and leave her truck there, unless she's expecting to come right back.
Who does this guy sound like to you?
It's Chester. I mean, I don't like to pinpoint a guy out, but Chester fits every description. And like the silver Impala, his mom and dad had a silver Impala.
According to Jennifer, the two had a rocky relationship that ended when Gary entered her mother's life. And Chester also fits the physical description of the mystery man from the parking lot.
You dated her for how long, sir?
We started dating, and I was with her for probably a year. She kicked me out, and then next thing I know, Gary's living there.
Despite a history of domestic violence and a bad breakup, Chester is genuinely concerned about Bonnie's whereabouts.
You think she's okay? Right now, what's your gut saying?
I'm scared.
Okay.
Because she's never done this before that I've ever known.
But a call to his employer, a local construction company, verifies that he was at work when Bonnie went missing.
I hope to God nothing wrong, and if I see her or hear anything, I'll let you know.
Investigators fear they are running out of leads when Detective O'Neill discovers that Bonnie isn't the only person who has gone missing from the Woodward household.
The main thing that we were able to gather from those interviews, and especially with family and friends and the current boyfriend, was that she had a 17-year-old stepdaughter, Heather Woodward, who was recently reported missing or as a runaway.
My little sister, is 17 years old. She's got a missing persons report like 2 to 2.5 weeks ago.
And that's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here. We have a woman that's missing, and her stepdaughter had been reported missing days before this as well.
Could these disappearances be connected?
There was nothing definitive that said the two were related, but we certainly felt that was something a path we needed to go on.
According to Bonnie's family, Heather might be staying with a trusted high school teacher.
She kept saying she was going to move in with this teacher.
This is the daughter?
Yeah. And Bonnie said, no, you're not. And I mean, this went on and on and on. Bonnie talked to the principal of school. She said, that's not going to happen.
We narrowed in on a teacher in a neighboring city called East Alton that Heather was last seen with her.
Detective O'Neill tracks down the teacher, who at first seems a bit guarded. While friends and family describe Bonnie as a loving mother of 4, Christine paints a different picture.
I had Heather in Algebra 1 class as a freshman, and she has been very vocal to myself and all the other teachers of the abuse that goes on at home.
She tells the detective that Bonnie and Heather had a volatile relationship, one that went downhill when Heather's father died 8 years ago, leaving Bonnie as sole guardian. While the relationship was generally bad, tensions flared in recent weeks. Heather and Bonnie constantly fight over Heather's wish to attend college. Christine hopes she could provide a safe haven for the teen until emotions cool down.
And it was during that interview with her that she said that Heather had left her residence and she didn't know where she went.
Bonnie called us the night of the 16th. She left a message on my phone that she was coming tomorrow to get Heather, and Heather should pack her stuff. And I did tell her she had to go back home. And she cried most of the night.
And then whenever you came back on the 17th, she was gone.
Right.
Locating Bonnie's stepdaughter is now Detective O'Neill's #1 priority.
We just knew that our investigation was going in 2 separate angles. 1, we needed to find Heather, and 2, we needed to find Bonnie and see what the situation was with either one or if there was any relationship between those two.
But without any clear leads, O'Neill worries that both cases might run out of steam. About a week after Bonnie goes missing, police get an unexpected phone call. Heather Woodward just walked into the town library.
She showed up at the East Alton Library on her 18th birthday on July 3rd, 2010, and basically said, "I'm Heather Woodward. I've been reported as a runaway."
It's been 8 days since Bonnie Woodward went missing after leaving work. Investigators have exhausted all viable leads when Bonnie's runaway stepdaughter, Heather, suddenly returns. Detective O'Neill wonders if the stepdaughter may have been involved in Bonnie's disappearance.
At that point, I went in to interview Heather and talk to her about where she'd been.
Okay, Heather, this is Detective Mike O'Neill from Alton Police Department. We just need to ask you a few things here.
The first initial interview with Heather was, I can't think of a better word than weird. Heather was for an 18-year-old, was very immature. She was holding a teddy bear with her. Her tone of voice sounded like a little girl's.
I packed my stuff and I left. I wasn't going home for 2 weeks to be kicked out again.
And then what happened?
And then I went to stay at a friend's house.
Okay, and who was that?
Just a friend. Don't want to get him in trouble.
Detective O'Neill wonders if this teen has something to hide.
Because you understand that Bonnie's missing right now, we don't have a clue where she's at, so anything that would help us, any other leads or information would be great.
They don't know nothing. They don't like Bonnie. I don't want to know where Bonnie's at.
Heather seemed upset about the overall situation, but in talking to her, it was just trying to assess where she's been, what she's been doing, why she took off.
Heather claims she has a lot of reasons for running away. Her relationship with Bonnie has gone from toxic to downright poisonous in the weeks before Bonnie's disappearance.
Bonnie can be mean, and sometimes she hits. Bonnie decided to tell me to pack everything and just get out. I was afraid to go home.
But it isn't just typical mother-daughter tension. Heather explains that Bonnie refuses to support her financially after she turns 18, when her father's death benefit checks would come to an end. Heather wants to apply to college, but Bonnie refuses to help. While this tracks with what Detective O'Neill has heard so far, it still doesn't answer the biggest question. Where was Heather when her mother disappeared?
And at that point, all we knew is she left the teacher's house and nobody had seen her.
Heather eventually told police who she had been with during that time.
I stayed with some people from the church.
So it's Nathan Carroll's family?
She provided information saying that she was with the Carroll family. She ultimately had attended church with the Carroll son, and that's how she kind of began to know the family. She identified Roger and Monica Carroll as being the parents.
In order to verify Heather's story, investigators head to the Carroll home to interview the church family who welcome Heather into their home.
After interviewing them, they acknowledged that Heather was with them. They acknowledged that they knew Heather was a runaway. And it was ultimately just their explanation, and especially Roger's explanation, was based on things that Heather had told them. They were keeping her safe.
Right off the bat, Heather's alibi checks out, but investigators are stuck by a couple of uncanny details. Roger Carroll fits the physical description of the Salt and Pepper mystery man, and there's a silver car parked in his driveway.
So those were obviously some key points that we were looking at, but still there was nothing there to 100% say that he was the person, or they did have that involvement in her disappearance.
But in order to make sure, Detective O'Neill asks the Carrolls to come down to the station to talk further.
They brought all three of the Carrolls into the police department and interviewed them all. They said that Heather had been staying with them, that they don't know anything about Bonnie, that Heather reported that Bonnie was somewhat abusive to her, and they don't know Bonnie, had never seen Bonnie, didn't know where she lived or worked. Just basically, we know nothing about Bonnie, but we had Heather with us.
Under questioning, Roger denies having ever met Bonnie Woodward. He is only trying to help his son's friend.
As far as Bonnie, you've never had a conversation with that woman, and you've never been face to face with that woman. You know where she lives, but you've never, other than you've driven by there, like 2 times, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Satisfied that Roger is being truthful, Detective O'Neill chalks up the similar hair and car to coincidence, but explains to the Carrolls that they are not entirely off the hook.
The 2 adult Carrolls, Roger and Monica, were charged with harboring a runaway and obstructing justice.
The couple are booked and fingerprinted, then sent home. Another lead in the case goes cold. Despite the setbacks, Detective O'Neill refuses to give up. He hopes to provide some form of closure to Bonnie's distraught family, who fear the worst.
We're still looking for Bonnie. We're still looking for any information related to her disappearance. And nothing. It just went silent with anything coming in.
As the weeks pass, fears grow Bonnie may never be found, dead or alive.
Then in September of 2010, we get the lead that cracks this thing wide open.
It gives me goosebumps to think about it. There was an extensive search, close to 40 or 50 law enforcement officers.
We took numerous firearms from the house and a large amount of ammunition.
Weeks after running away, Heather Woodward returns, but her stepmother is still missing, and now presumed dead. The church-going family who provide refuge to Heather appear to be good Samaritans, assisting a teen in distress. And just when the investigation seems to be turning ice cold, Detective O'Neill gets a phone call that flips the case on its head.
The Illinois State Police Crime Lab gets in contact with our department, and they notify us that there were fingerprints that we had obtained and sent to the lab for analysis. And of those prints, there were prints that matched up with Roger Carroll.
It's a stunning turn for the investigation, and no one is more surprised than Detective O'Neill.
During Roger's initial interview, he had said that he had never had contact with Bonnie. Based on our interpretation from that interview, there'd be no reason for him to have ever touched her vehicle. So at this point, we knew that he had at least provided false information.
It's enough to take Bonnie's case out of the deep freeze. The matched prints and Roger Carroll's connection to Heather are enough to obtain a search warrant for the Carrolls' property. The district attorney's office is also informed that the Carrolls are now under suspicion for Bonnie's presumed murder.
So after the police got the information that Roger Carroll's fingerprints matched Bonnie Woodward's car, there was an extensive search. Dozens, if not close to 40 or 50 law enforcement officers went to the Carroll property.
But this search will not be easy.
There's 60 acres of land there. We're just looking for anything at that point. We searched the vehicles, searched the house, searched the property for anything that may be linking Bonnie to that property or to that family. It was very difficult to search such a wide area for specific evidence.
Unfortunately, they don't find any trace of Bonnie, but do find something else that heightens their suspicions.
During that search, we took numerous firearms from the house. They had close to 30 firearms and a large amount of ammunition, more than I could even count, that was inside this house. But also we had to understand that this is a rural country area. You know, it's not too shocking for a family to collect guns and have a large amount of guns.
You got a lot of guns in the house, right?
A few.
A few. And you target practice, I guess, routinely?
Some. I not as much as I used to, because ammo's got.
What do you usually target practice with? Handguns or long guns or?
It depends. I mean, a little of each.
And it was at that point Roger was interviewed, and more specifically this time, had he ever had contact with Bonnie? Had he ever touched her truck?
Any chance your fingerprints would be on Bonnie's car? On the driver's door? Like all over it?
Oh, no way. No.
No chance?
No.
Okay.
And then when faced with the situation of fingerprints of his were on her truck on the driver's side door, basically in the same area that it was reported that this unknown person was talking to her at the end of her work shift, why were those prints there?
Any chance your DNA would be all over that driver's door?
No. No way.
And how do we explain it if it is?
Yeah. Then I've been framed. I mean, no, there's no way that my fingerprints are on that car door or my DNA is on that car door. There just is no way.
Your prints are on that door.
Confronted with this damning fingerprint evidence, Roger doubles down on his story.
His explanation was they weren't his. He had never touched her truck, and the only thing he can come up with that he was been framed, and no other explanation to show for why those prints were there.
Roger Carroll was charged with a felony obstructing justice, and that was pretty much the end of the conversation at that point.
Investigators have to answer a confounding question. Why would Roger Carroll want to kill Bonnie Woodward? Could Heather have encouraged him? Investigators interview Heather, who is now attending college.
Has there ever been any point where he has ever seen Bonnie that you know of?
No.
Has there been any point where he has ever seen her car, at least?
So in that interview, we made it clear to her about the fingerprint that were found on the truck.
What we're trying to tell you right now, there's new physical evidence in this case. That's why we're recontacting you. Okay, and this is what we need to know.
There is no reason for his prints to be on Bonnie's truck.
No, there's not.
She seemed genuinely shocked that there would be that contact. She didn't know of any circumstance in which Roger would have ever touched her vehicle.
O'Neill is unable to prove conclusively that Heather has no knowledge of what Roger Carroll did on that day in June when Bonnie disappeared.
I don't want them to come back in their interviews right now and say that Heather told us to do it.
No, I didn't tell him because I don't want nothing to happen to Bonnie.
Under questioning, she denies any involvement and seems very distraught by the possibility that Roger has something to do with Bonnie's disappearance. Without a body, a murder weapon, or a witness, Detective O'Neill's hands are tied.
Ultimately, if something did happen and there was foul play, trying a homicide without a body would be very difficult, and it's difficult to prove. So having only the fingerprint and a few conversations wasn't enough for us to push it over.
Sharing this disappointing reality with Bonnie's family dredges up hard emotions.
Those conversations I had with the family was very difficult during that time and the years that had gone by without any new leads and nothing else. And at this point, the Carroll family had shut down. They did not want to speak to us any further, and we knew that there was nothing else that we could do at this point other than just wait.
And once again, the Bonnie Woodward case goes cold. Until a special prosecutor takes up the case file, almost by chance.
I was with the Madison County, Illinois State's Attorney's Office for 18 years. I personally became interested in cold cases that were in my office at the time. And I asked my supervisor if I could begin looking into some cold cases. The Bonnie Woodward case just happened to be the first one I pulled out.
After steeping herself in the facts, Jennifer Mudge is certain that Roger Carroll has gotten away with murder.
All we had was his prints on her car, and we did not have her body.
Faced with the same challenges Detective O'Neill confronted 8 years ago, Mudge realizes there's not much she can do. But 2 months later, she receives a phone call that changes everything.
They called me to tell me that Roger Carroll had attempted suicide. He had committed a domestic battery on his wife, Monica, and then he had walked off into the woods, injected himself with insulin, and a Jersey County Sheriff's deputy found him unresponsive, near death. He was taken to a hospital and arrested for the domestic battery.
And at that point, we thought this may be our time to try it again, to see if there's anything new that we can establish, to get going with this case again on as far as Bonnie's disappearance. This may be our only opportunity to continue forward.
But it's not Roger he wants to focus on.
It was after that we reached out to Monica and ultimately explained to her our situation in the case. She was willing to speak to us at this time.
Investigators learn that Monica is divorcing Roger for infidelity.
We have been living separate in the home. Okay. He actually moved out of the bedroom, went to a separate part of the house. He connected up with a woman at work and had an affair.
And given the current state of her marriage, she's now willing to tell them everything she knows.
If Roger Carroll gets out, I am scared to death that he will come after me.
"47-year-old Bonnie Woodward has been missing for years, and the case has gone cold. With no body, the only piece of evidence, a set of fingerprints belonging to Roger Carroll, are not enough to convict.
I mean, no, there's no way that my fingerprints are on that car door or my DNA is on that car door. There's just no way.
Your prints are on that door.
But now, a new investigator interested in the case has stumbled onto a twist in Roger's life. He's just tried to commit suicide, and his wife Monica has some shocking information about him.
She was able to discuss several situations and circumstances with Roger, ultimately saying that Roger never came right out and told her that he is responsible for Bonnie's disappearance or death at the time.
He told me he didn't have anything to do with it. So I believed him. At that point in my marriage,
she talked about a large fire that was being stoked on the property.
There was a big brush pile that he just burnt for a long time. And I'm talking days.
How far was this from the house?
Pretty close.
Monica's suspicions alone are not enough to move the needle forward. So they turn to another family member who may now feel free to talk with Roger behind bars.
We had a meeting, the investigators, myself and my co-counsel, and we thought the first person we would want to speak to would be the son. Because at the time of Bonnie's murder, the son was 16 years old. So fast forward 8 years later, his mom has just been beaten by his dad, and he might have some things to say about something that he saw back in 2010 that he, as a 16-year-old, would not have wanted to say.
But Nathan is unwilling to speak with detectives. However, he is willing to testify for a grand jury on one condition: that he be granted immunity. Nathan's testimony is nothing short of explosive. He claims that his father became increasingly enraged with Bonnie's alleged mistreatment of Heather and made it his mission to save her, unbeknownst to the runaway teen.
His dad told him that Bonnie, Heather's stepmom, had to go, that she was going to bring bad things their way, and that they had to take care of it. They stopped by Bonnie's house. They stopped by Bonnie's work. His dad specifically commented, "Good, she's at work." They went back to the house. His dad trimmed his beard, put a ball cap on, trimmed his fingernails, got one of the guns in the home, and left. A couple hours maybe later, Nathan says his father came home. He heard the car pull in the driveway, and he heard a few gunshots. Nathan was sitting at the kitchen table. When he walked out, he saw feet, and he remembered that there were scrubs on the feet, and Bonnie worked at a nursing home, so she wore scrubs every day. He walked around the corner, and he saw Bonnie Woodward laying on the side of the house, dead. He saw his dad shoot her one more time.
Freed from his father's controlling presence, Nathan unloads the terrible burden he's carried for years.
This is where she laid.
Okay. Roger obtained this front loader from their property and ultimately picked up Bonnie's body, took her back to what was described by Monica as the burn site. Her deceased body was burnt in an attempt to get rid of the evidence. Following these multiple days of burning, they took that same front loader, scraped off the top few inches of soil at that burn site, and then dumped these ashes and dirt into a nearby creek that runs through their property. And then he also walked us to this area as well to point out this area.
Where the ashes were dumped?
He took them on a walkthrough, showed them where she was shot, showed them where the burn pile was, and then he came with investigators back to the police department where they had seized all of Roger Carroll's guns.
We showed him several guns, and he did point out a 9mm semi-automatic handgun at the time. And he had said that that was the one that his father had used on that day.
Nathan's testimony is shocking, but it's not enough to convict his father without physical evidence. Police obtain another search warrant, and this time they know exactly where to look.
After we learned where to look for evidence, another massive search happened. This time I would say over 100 law enforcement officers went out to the scene.
It was a meticulous search that happened for 3 days. The area next to the house, which would be the site where she was ultimately shot and killed, we did find shell casings, at least one that was a 9mm shell casing, 9mm being the same gun that was used and Nathan identified. We also found a 9mm firearm projectile.
But investigators worry that the days-long fire may have destroyed any ballistic markings that would match the bullet to the 9mm. So they send the evidence to firearms experts for specialized testing.
Bullets, by their very nature, are designed to survive heat. When they are fired, they undergo the friction of rubbing up against the barrel, which produces a lot of heat. Also, they're exposed to a lot of heat when the cartridge itself is designated and the gases are burning beside them or behind them. So they're able to withstand a great deal of heat. They took that bullet from the crime scene and they compared it to test fires from the semi-automatic 9mm weapon, and they looked at it under a comparison microscope and determined that that bullet was fired from that weapon.
It's a perfect match. At long last, investigators finally have their murder weapon. But what they don't have is a body.
At the burn site, we found some more shell casings, but also what appeared to be charred remains of bone fragments.
The bone fragments are too damaged by fire to yield any DNA, but there's still enough to build a case. On the strength of ballistics testing, along with the fingerprints and Nathan Carroll's eyewitness testimony against his father, Roger Carroll is finally charged with the murder of Bonnie Woodward.
On June 25th, 2010, Roger W. Carroll lured Bonnie Woodward from Madison County to a location in Jersey County, where he then ended her life by shooting her, and then concealed her death by placing her in a fire and burning her remains.
Roger was charged in Jersey County with 3 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping and concealment of a homicidal death.
The trial was lengthy. It's, in essence, a no-body homicide. We never really were able to locate Bonnie's body, which is something that, very rare that you ever see.
I believe that there have been less than 500 cases in the world that have been tried and convicted without a body. It's very, very rare to try a case without a body, let alone get a conviction without a body.
10 years after Bonnie vanishes, Roger Carroll finally faces a jury.
Ultimately, we went to trial on 1 count of first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for approximately 3 to 4 hours, I believe, and they convicted him of first-degree murder.
Roger was very controlling. That was confirmed with the statements. That was something that I even perceived as how this family was ran back in 2010 when this case first came to them, is that he had a really strong hold on this family, over his wife, over his son.
People have blamed Nathan as being complicit in this murder, and that just is not the case.
Nathan ultimately coming forward was a big step in the investigation. He certainly could have kept that quiet.
He was a boy who had a murderer for a father. He was scared. He did what his father told him to do. Not only is he not a murderer, but he's sort of a hero, because it took a lot of guts for him to stand up in that courtroom and tell the truth. We couldn't have done any of this without him and his statement.
With his conviction finally secured, Bonnie's family can begin healing from their decade-long trauma.
The family knew that Roger was responsible. And this was more closure for them, knowing that all these years of Bonnie disappearing, and some people out there were saying that Bonnie just walked away or she left, which they knew wasn't true. They knew that something happened to their sister, to their mother. And this was a good conclusion for them to kind of put this thing to rest and start to move on. As difficult as it is for them to do that.
She had a lot of people that loved her, and she gave a lot of love to a lot of other people as well. So her family, to say that they were with me every minute of every day of that trial is an understatement. I talked to every one of them multiple times per day. They were present for all of it, and they, I think, breathed a big sigh of relief when it was over.